Good evening, friend, and welcome back. Let the day loosen its hold, and let your breathing slow. Let the shoulders soften where they rest, and the hands grow still. Tonight, we slip inside the walls of a medieval English monastery in the 13th or 14th century, in the hours after the last bell of the day. The great gate is closed. Compline is sung. The community has climbed the day stair to bed, in a long dorter above the cloister, where each brother sleeps in his own small cell. It is a house of about 50 vowed men, kept by another 100 servants and lay brothers, and by 7 or 8 named officers whose whole night work is to keep the light burning and the door watched while everyone else lies down. Not the version the histories give in a list of dates, the real evening and the real night. If this kind of quiet history is good to fall asleep to, a subscribe and a like help these long histories find the people who want them, but there is no need to do it now. Do it when you feel it, and if you like, leave a comment somewhere below, and let me know where in the world you are listening from tonight and what time it is there. Someone tonight is in a cold bedroom with the lamp turned low. Someone else is driving a long dark road with the radio soft. I like to think of you all in your different rooms. Dim your lights the rest of the way. Let the fan hum, or the rain, or whatever quiet you have around you. Come with me. Let us go back, a long way back, to a valley in Yorkshire, or a hill in Kent, or an old fen town in the eastern counties, sometime near the year 1280, and step in through a small door in a high stone wall while the last light is going out of the sky. The question to leave with you as we go. Who is awake, and why, while the whole valley sleeps? So the last light is going out of the sky above the valley. The sun has already gone behind the western ridge. The colour that is left in the west is a low soft rose, the kind that stays for a quarter of an hour and then slips into blue. In the valley itself the light is grey already. The river at the foot of the meadow has turned the colour of pewter, and a mist is beginning to lift off the water in slow, low fingers. And here, on the far side of the meadow, is the abbey. You would see it as a very great stone shoulder rising quietly out of its own precinct wall, a church tower squared against the fading sky, a long line of tiled roofs behind the wall, and further back the darker mass of the granges and the outbuildings, smoke going up from 2 or 3 chimneys in soft grey lines. No lamps yet at the windows because the walls are so thick the day still holds inside for another quarter of an hour after it has gone outside. Only the small warm glow of a single lantern, hung on its hook beside the great gate, and lit already by whoever it is that keeps the gate here. That someone is the porter. His name is not written down, so tonight, if you will let me, we will call him Brother Edmund. He is an old brother. He has been in this house since he was a boy of 15. He has done his working life in the cellarage and in the guest hall, and, briefly, on the abbey's own farm at a small distant grange. The rule of his order, written down almost 700 years before this evening by a man in Italy, said that at the gate of the monastery there should be placed a wise old man, one who knows how to receive an answer and to give one, and whose ripeness of years suffers him not to wander. Brother Edmund fits that description well enough. He has been on the gate for 11 years now. It is his last long service, and he is very good at it. So let us watch him for a moment. He has just come out of his lodge, which is the small stone room built into the thickness of the gate itself. The lodge has a low door, an unglazed slit window, a bench that runs the length of one wall, a small hearth in the corner with a low fire in it, already banked for the night, and a wooden stool set beside the wicket. On the wall behind the stool, a heavy iron key hangs on its own peg. This is the key to the great gate, and only the porter and the abbot have one. Edmund is closing the great gate now. He does not hurry. He walks it shut, first one leaf and then the other, the timber heavy and set on iron hinges the size of a man's forearm. The 2 leaves come together with a low, soft sound, and Edmund drops the great bar into its housing across them, and steps back, and looks at the shut wood for a moment. Then he turns the key in the wicket. The wicket is the small door set into one leaf of the great gate, at head height, and it is the door that stays in use through the night. It has its own lock, its own small window with an iron grille. A traveller coming to the abbey after dark knocks at the wicket, not at the great gate. Edmund answers the knock through the grille, and only opens the wicket when he is content. He turns and goes back inside the lodge. He does not sit down. He puts a small piece of wood onto the fire and pushes at it gently with an iron. He straightens the blanket on his cot in the corner. He trims the wick of the lantern hanging from a hook by the door. He sets his key back on its peg, and then he comes back out into the deepening evening and stands for a moment in the dusk of his own gatehouse yard looking up at the abbey. The lamp above him casts a soft warm light across the paving. His hood is up. The evening is not cold yet, only cool. From where he stands he can see all the way up the short slope to the guest hall, and to the west range of the cloister behind it, and further off the west end of the church. In the church a single small point of warm yellow has already come alight in one of the western lancets. That is the sanctuary lamp which never goes out. It has been burning above the pyx above the high altar every hour of every day and every night since the church was consecrated, 65 years ago. Whether or not there is anyone in the choir, the lamp is there. If it should ever go down, Edmund would know it by the running feet in the cloister, but it does not go down. There is always a boy in the sacristy whose one job is to keep it lit. Edmund crosses himself gently without hurry. Because this closing of the gate is one of the 7 watches of the night. The medieval mind loved to divide the dark into 7 watches, from sunset to sunrise. The first watch begins as the light goes. The last ends as the first birds sing. Between them the night is divided the way the day is divided by the hours of the sun, and the 7 watches were felt in this age as a real shape, one that the community lived inside without ever quite saying so. Edmund's own night is the 7 watches. He closes the gate at the first. He answers a knock, if it comes, in any of the middle ones. He opens the wicket in the last when the birds begin. So this is the first watch. The evening bell in the abbey tower begins. 2 long notes, then a pause, then 2 long notes, then a pause. Then the bell steadies into its long, slow rhythm, 1 soft strike every 3 seconds, and holds it for the length of 100 slow breaths. This is the bell that calls the community to vespers. In the fields, where the last lay brothers were bringing in the small stack of last-cut hay on a 2-wheeled cart, the men are stopping and straightening their backs. In the mill, the wheel is being let quietly out of gear. In the abbot's own study, above the west range, the lamp is being covered with its little shade, and the abbot is standing up and reaching for his prayer book. In the kitchen, the cook is putting the last dish of the day into the fire's edge to keep warm. Everywhere in the precinct and out to the granges hands are stopping. Edmund tilts his head to the sound of the bell and stands with it a moment. Then he goes back into his lodge, sits down on his stool by the wicket, and takes up his own small prayer book, and begins to say his own quiet Compline of Vespers to himself under his breath. Because the porter cannot always leave the gate to walk up to the choir. On many nights, at many houses, he says the offices where he sits. His prayer book is much rubbed at the corners. His fingers know the pages. His voice, when he uses it, is soft, low, gentle. You would like his voice. Above him the evening bell keeps its slow rhythm, and behind Edmund, up the short slope from the gate, the guest hall is already lit and warm, and the guest master is waiting at the door for whoever else might come in tonight. That is where we go next. The small lamp above Edmund's wicket burns on quietly behind us as we go. So we walk together up the short slope from the gate. The guest hall stands to our left, just inside the outer wall, so a guest who comes in through the wicket does not have to cross the enclosure. It is a long 2-storey building of good stone, with its own small yard and its own stable at one end. There is a door open a hand's width in the middle of the near wall, and a warm yellow light comes out through the gap and settles on the paving of the yard. Above the door a single small lantern hangs from a hook, and it too is lit. This is the hospitium. In the older Latin of the rule, it is called simply the guest house. It stands at almost every English monastic house of this period, from the great Benedictine Cathedral Priory at Durham to the small Cistercian daughter house on the moor. It is the door the world comes in through. At the door, in a plain black habit with the hood pushed back and a linen scapular over the shoulders, is a middle-aged brother. His name we may call Brother Adam. He is the guest master. His office is one of the more important in the house, because on it hangs the abbey's whole reputation for hospitality, which in this age is the most public of a monastery's outward faces. He has been guest master for 4 years. Adam sees us coming up from the gate. Well, he does not see us tonight because we are only visiting the memory. But he sees the shape of Brother Edmund still up by his gatehouse, sees no one else on the road behind him, understands there is no late traveller at the wicket tonight, and yet keeps the door open a hand's width all the same. It is a small kindness. Sometimes the traveller comes late, on a bad horse, in a bad wind, and the sight of the guest hall's open door from the road is a mercy. Come inside. The hall is a long room. At the near end there are 3 trestle tables set up along the wall with benches. In the middle there is an open floor and a wide hearth, and in the hearth a good clean fire is burning. It has been made up a little more fully than usual because the evening is turning cool, and Adam does not know yet whether a traveller will need warming. At the far end of the hall, curtained off with a heavy woolen curtain hung from an iron rod, are the sleeping cubicles. Behind the curtain the smaller lamps have already been lit, and each cubicle has a bed with a clean linen sheet and a wool blanket folded at the foot, and a small stool, and a candle on the stool in a shallow pewter dish. Above the fire, on a shelf, are 3 pewter cups and a stoneware jug covered with a linen cloth. In the jug is warm spiced ale. In a covered earthenware pot beside it is a small warm pottage of oats and cheese. There is a loaf of good bread in a wooden bowl. There is a plate of dried fruit. If a traveller came in now, it would be poured and given to him before he had even finished saying who he was. That is the rule. The rule. Because there is a rule. The whole hospitality of the house sits on one sentence, written down almost 700 years before by St. Benedict of Nursia, in the 53rd chapter of his rule for monks. The sentence is short. Let all guests who arrive be received as Christ, for he himself will say, I was a stranger and you took me in. There is nothing else in the rule that is quite so plain or quite so total. It is not, keep a guest hall for those who can pay for it. It is not, receive as guests those who suit the house. It is, any guest at any hour is Christ. The great gate opens to that guest. The wicket opens to that guest. The guest master rises to that guest, and that guest is given food and a fire and a bed before any question is asked of him about his family, his errand, or the state of his purse. You can see how this works out in practice by looking at Adam's evening. Adam has, since the middle of the afternoon, made ready. He has walked through the hall, checked each of the 6 beds behind the curtain, turned back the linen sheet at the corner so that a guest coming in at any hour of the night will see a made and inviting bed. He has laid a small stool at each bedside. He has trimmed the wicks of the small bedside candles. He has been down to the guest kitchen at the back of the hall and taken up the pottage and the bread and the ale from the guest cook. He has made sure the fire is banked, so that it will keep till dawn. He has spoken to the young lay servant who sleeps on a straw mattress in the corner of the hall by night, whose one job is to fetch him if the wicket bell rings. And now, with all of that done, he's standing in the doorway of his own hall in the last of the day, waiting. He's not idle. He has his own prayer book in his hand, and he is saying his own vespers, under his breath, in the low, soft cadence you would use for a child you were talking to sleep. His mouth barely moves. His breath makes a small warm cloud in the doorway, because the evening has just tipped from cool into faintly cold. He hears the great abbey bell keep on its long, slow rhythm behind and above him, and one part of his mind is with the community up in the choir. He will not walk up to vespers tonight, because his own office is to be here at the door. His office is like Edmund's, in that way. On many evenings the two of them say their Compline of Vespers alone, in their own places, while the church is full. He hears something else now and turns his head. Only 2 or 3 houses this side of the great tower there are the small bells of the Abbey's own night pattern. In a small house there are 2 great bells, cast by a bell founder somewhere in the eastern counties, one named for the Abbey's patron and one for Our Lady, hung on their own oak yoke in the low tower. In a great house like Bury St Edmunds there are 6, the day bell, the Compline bell, the passing bell for the dying, the great bell rung at the elevation at high mass, and 2 more that ring together with all of them for the whole peal on the great feasts. Adam's house tonight has 3 bells, because he is in a middling house of the Black Monks. The 3 of them can be rung together, and are on the 4 great feasts of the year. On an ordinary Wednesday like this one, only one of them is ringing, and Adam knows which one by ear the way you know a friend's voice, the evening bell. He crosses himself gently. He steps back into the hall, walks the length of it, checks the fire, it is fine, checks the pottage, it is fine, and goes back to the door. He closes the door a little further so only a narrow beam of yellow light comes out into the yard. If a traveller comes, the beam will still be there to guide him to the door. If a traveller does not come, the hall will hold its own warmth till dawn. He steps outside. He looks up the slope. Beyond the guest hall and behind him, past the yard and past the corner of the west range, the working world of the Abbey is now closing down. The last of the field hands are coming in from the granges. The lay brothers on the west range are walking in from the woodyard and the byres and the mills. Their own dusk is coming down. That is where we go next. Adam's small lamp above the door burns on quietly behind us as we go. So we walk together past Adam's guest hall and along the outer wall for 100 paces or so, and we come to a broad open yard set at the western side of the precinct. This is the outer court. It is where the working world of the Abbey lives. You would call it a farm and a workshop yard combined. It has room enough in it for 4 cart horses to be turned. On the far side of it stand the Abbey's stables, the smithy with its low chimney, the woodyard with its long stacks of split timber under a shingle roof, the Abbey's own bakehouse, behind which the great bread ovens rise like 2 low domes on the outer wall, the tannery, kept as far as possible from the church because of the smell, the fish yard, and running along the whole west wall of the cloister itself, the long 2-storey range that is the lay brothers' quarter. The Cistercians made the lay brothers. That, more than the plain chant or the white habits, is what the reform of the 12th century really did. The old Benedictines had always had servants, of course. Every abbey had and paid for a small army of ploughmen and cowherds and cooks and cellarmen. The reformers of Citeaux, when they came into Yorkshire and into the wild valleys of the north in the 1100s, wanted to work the fields themselves. So they invented, out of the old lay brotherhood of the desert, a new kind of vowed man, the conversi, the turned ones. They took a vow, they wore a habit, they lived by rule. But they did not go to choir, they did not say the offices in Latin. Instead, they said a short round of Our Fathers and Hail Marys in their own tongue, in their own daughter, at their own hours. And they went out at first light and did the Abbey's outdoor work. By the year we stand in tonight, the northern Cistercian houses had a great many lay brothers, more of them at some houses than of choir monks. They kept the whole farming and industrial life of the house. The great solarium at Fountains, 300 feet long, still standing today, was theirs. So this yard tonight is a yard of the last lay brothers of the working day. A young man of about 20 in a plain brown habit with a leather belt is leading a small tired grey pony toward the stables. He does not speak. In the Cistercian working discipline, the lay brothers keep silence too most of the day and use signs. He leads the pony gently. The pony is one of the 2 the Abbey uses to bring in the last of the hay. He unbuckles the little cart, which is small and low and made of the same weathered wood as everything the lay brothers touch. He wheels it into the woodyard, out of the weather. He takes the pony into the stable, and inside, in the warm brown quiet of it, he takes off the harness, sets it on its peg, rubs the pony down with a handful of straw, gives it a wooden bucket of water and a small handful of oats, and stands with his hand on the pony's neck for a moment before he leaves. His name we will call Brother Wulfric of the North Grange. Wulfric came into this house at 18. He is now 22. He came from a farming family 2 valleys away. He can read a little. He cannot write. When he first arrived, he was frightened of the church, because it seemed to him such a great cold stone room to walk into. He is not frightened of it now. His day started very early. The lay brothers, in most Cistercian houses of this period, rose well before the choir monks, said their short round of prayers in the Westrange Daughter, ate a small dry meal, and were out at the byres by the first grey. Wulfric was on the North Grange today, which is a farm the abbey holds 7 miles up the valley. He walked out at dawn, worked the barley field there with 2 of his brothers, ate their midday meal in the Grange kitchen, walked back before vespers. 7 miles. It is the standing daily walk of the shepherd of the abbey's flock in some houses, and it is the standing daily walk today of Wulfric on the North Grange. He's a young strong man, and it does not tire him. He comes out of the stable now and walks across the outer court. Above him the evening bell is still going. He passes the smithy, where the smith, who is not a monk but a lay servant paid a wage, is putting his last iron to cool in the water tub with a soft hiss. The smith nods to him. Wulfric nods back. He passes the bakehouse, where the baker, also a lay servant, an older man with white flour on his eyebrows, is drawing his last 2 loaves of the day out of the great oven with a long wooden peel. The baker sets them on a rack to cool. Tomorrow's morning bread is already covered under a linen cloth on the long table, the sponge set at dusk rising slowly through the night. Wulfric goes past. He does not stop. He walks the length of the outer court and turns in at the low door in the West Range. Inside, in the ground floor of the West Range, is the lay brothers' freighter. Long trestle tables, low benches, a stone floor swept clean, a small hearth at the far end. 12 of Wulfric's brothers are sitting quietly at the tables with their evening meal in front of them, and one older brother is reading aloud from a book of Lives of the Saints, in English, in a soft voice. The others eat slowly. The meal is a bowl of hot pea pottage, a piece of the day's bread, a small piece of cheese, a wooden cup of the small beer brewed in the abbey's own brewhouse. Wulfric sits down at his place. Someone puts a bowl in front of him. Someone else fills his cup. He eats. He does not speak. The reader reads. Above them all, faintly through the stones, the community's own chant of vespers has begun in the choir. It comes down the wall as a low warm murmur, not words but a running sound. Wulfric, who once was frightened of the church, likes this sound. He listens for it while he eats. It is the sound of the day drawing in. When his bowl is empty, he sets it on the small rack by the door. He goes out into the outer court again. The sky's properly blue now, that soft blue of the last quarter hour of light, and the western ridge is a dark line against it. He walks back to the stable, opens the door a hand's width, looks in at the pony, sees the ponies lying down in the straw, closes the door, and he walks slowly across the outer court toward the door in the western wall of the cloister that will let him into his own daughter. Behind him and above him, in the church, the evening chant is running. Above him and beyond that, on the low tower, the bell has settled to its final stopping tempo. 1 strike, wait. 1 strike, wait. And then silence. That silence is our next stop, because as the last note of the evening bell fades out over the valley and vespers begins in earnest, the whole abbey turns and quietens and gathers into the church. The small lamp above the west door of the cloister burns on quietly behind Wulfric as he goes. That is where we go next. So the whole abbey has gathered into the church. The church is very great. In the smaller houses it is 1-aisled nave, a chancel, 2 transepts, and a low central tower. In the middling ones it is a longer nave with side aisles, a taller crossing tower, and a full ambulatory around the presbytery behind the high altar. In the great cathedral priories, at Durham or at Ely or at Peterborough or at Norwich, It is the whole vast Norman building the parish still uses today. Tonight, in the house we are inside, the church is a middling one. It has a nave 150 feet long, a crossing tower, 2 transepts, and a fine long presbytery with 3 lancet windows behind the altar. At this hour, in the last of the day, most of the church is dark. The nave beyond the choir screen is a well of moving shadow. Only the choir itself and the sanctuary behind it are lit. In the sanctuary above the high altar, the sanctuary lamp is burning quietly on its long chain. Below it, on the altar itself, one great candle has been lit, and in the choir stalls to the north and south of the presbytery, at each pair of stalls, one small tallow candle has been set out on the little shelf where the singer rests his book. That is a great deal of light for such a great room, and it is very little. The community has come in through the door at the end of the north transept. They come in barefoot or slippered, according to the season, in their long undyed woolen habits with the deep sleeves and the great hoods thrown back. They cross to the presbytery. They take their own places at the stalls, the abbot at the second stall on the north, which is by ancient convention the presiding stall, not the first, the prior opposite him, the precentor at the second stall on the south, the sub-prior on the north, then the older brethren in order of profession, then the younger, then, at the very ends of the choir, the novices. The whole community stands in silence for the space of a slow breath, and then, at a single small sign from the precentor, the office begins. The precentor tonight we will call Brother Aldhelm. Aldhelm is the choirmaster of the house. His office is one of the ancient ones. He is responsible for the whole music of the abbey, the teaching of the novices, the ordering of the antiphonaries, the keeping of the pitch. On a Sunday or a feast day he sings the difficult solo parts himself. On a ferial evening like this one he simply gives the note. He gives it now. He hums, very quietly, one soft note on the tone the office begins on. The community picks it up. The opening antiphon rises in one voice, slow, in unison, in the plain chant that has been sung in this house since the church was built. The plain chant is the calm, plain, sung Latin of the medieval Latin church. It has no beat, no harmony, no organ. It moves in long, unhurried phrases, one syllable to the note or a small handful of notes to the syllable, over an even breath. It is the calmest music the Western world has ever made, and it is what these men have been formed by since they were boys. The first psalm begins. It is the psalm proper to a Wednesday evening in this week of the year. The community sings it a verse at a time, one side of the choir taking a verse and then the other, back and forth across the presbytery. This is called singing by antiphony. It gives every voice its breath. It gives every side of the choir its rest between verses. The sound of it, in this church, is one of the warmest sounds in the world. It is not what you would call impressive. It is what you would call kind. Between 2 of the verses, if you were standing in the shadow of the choir screen and listening, you would hear one small sound. It's the sound of one page turning gently on a lectern. The sub-cantor, standing at the great choir lectern in the middle of the presbytery, is turning the page of the antiphonary he keeps for the choir, and the antiphonary is a great heavy book, and the parchment page is thick, and when it turns it makes one soft dry sound in the whole listening church. There is a whole psalter here. The whole psalter, 150 psalms, was sung through in 1 week by the Benedictine cursus of the offices, every psalm every week in order, so that in a monk's whole life, week in and week out, from his first year in the novitiate at 15 to his death at 70, he would have sung the whole psalter over 3,000 times. It would have run in his blood. Every phrase of it would have known his voice. Every phrase of his voice would have been shaped by it. Aldhelm tonight is 50 years old. He can sing any psalm of the 150 by heart. He looks down at his antiphonary during the office out of long practice, but his eyes only rest on the page. His voice does the rest. The office of Vespers has, in this cursus, several psalms, an antiphon between each, a short chapter, a very short reading from Scripture, only a handful of verses, a hymn appointed to the day, a versicle and its response, the Magnificat with its antiphon, a small collect, and the abbot's blessing at the end. On a ferial evening it moves quietly and does not take a great while. On a feast it takes longer because everything is longer and there is more music. Tonight it is the ferial pattern. If you were standing there in the choir stalls, you would feel very quickly that the point of the office is not to be got through. The point of the office is to be in it. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is dwelt on for effect. The music rises and settles like breath. Between the psalms there is a small silence long enough for a slow breath. Between the chapter and the hymn there is a small silence. Between the last collect and the blessing there is the longest silence, and in it you could hear, if you listened, the sanctuary lamp above the pyx faintly clinking on its chain in a very slow draught from the crossing. And that is really the whole thing. You will notice, if you stand there for the full length of it, that at no point does anyone stop to explain anything. No one welcomes the community to Vespers. No one announces the psalms. No one names the antiphons. No one asks anyone to turn to a page. The whole thing is entered into and left in the same understanding that everyone in the room has been in the same understanding for many years. This is one of the very deep pleasures of the medieval church. Its offices trust you. They assume you know where you are. The Magnificat rises now. The Magnificat is the great evening canticle, the Song of Mary from the first chapter of the Gospel of Luke. It is the one moment of every Vespers in every Western monastery, every evening of the year. The community stands. They have been standing anyway, but here they stand a little straighter. The great candle on the altar is trimmed once quietly by the young server. The censer, in some houses, is now brought to the altar and swung softly through the presbytery, sending small warm curls of frankincense up into the shaft of light above the altar and out into the dark church. Tonight, in this ordinary evening, the censer is not used. The Magnificat rises without incense, in the same plain chant, unhurried, in one voice. You do not need to know the words. You only need to feel that the whole church is now full of one warm, long sound. Then a small silence. Then the abbot, from the second stall, gives the blessing. Vespers is over. The community bows to the altar. The candles on the choir stalls are gently pinched out one by their singers. The great candle on the altar is left burning. The sanctuary lamp burns on above the pyx as it has burned all day. The community turns in one movement, and turns from the choir to walk down the north transept and back through the door and down the cloister to the frater, where the evening meal is waiting. That is where we go next. The small lamp of the sanctuary burns on quietly behind us as we go. So we come down the cloister with the community in the last blue light. The cloister at this hour is a beautiful place. Its 4 covered walks run around the open inner garth, and the garth tonight is a small square of pale grey grass with one lime tree in the middle of it and a stone wellhead in the corner. The arcades along the walks are set with small round columns, 3 arches to a bay, 20 bays in each walk. Above the arches, in the outer wall, are the small pointed windows that let a little of the outside light in during the day. Tonight the windows are dark blue against a sky that is now very nearly black. Only one small lantern is going with the community. That lantern is being carried by the sub-cellarer, who is walking a few paces ahead of the abbot, lighting the way to the frater door. The frater is on the south side of the cloister, which is by ancient monastic architectural rule the sunny side, warmed on winter days by the sun through the cloister windows. It is a great long high hall of good stone, running the whole south range of the cloister. Its floor is set with pale stone slabs. Its ceiling is a fine timber roof, the beams laid on stone corbels. Along the north wall, the wall it shares with the cloister, runs the great long stone frater bench, its back to the wall, low and comfortable, worn smooth by shoulders. Along the south wall runs a similar bench. 2 long trestle tables have been set up down the middle of the room, tonight for the evening meal, and set with wooden trenchers, wooden bowls, wooden cups, and long slices of the day's bread laid straight on the boards. Halfway along the south wall, built out into the room, is the frater pulpit. It is a small spiral stone stair set into the thickness of the wall, rising to a little stone platform above the heads of the community, from which the reader for the week reads aloud during the meal. The frater pulpits of Beaulieu, of Chester, of Shrewsbury still stand today, and any traveller who walks a ruined abbey in England and sees a small, mysterious stone stair in the middle of a long wall is looking at a frater pulpit and does not always know it. Tonight's reader is a young brother at his first week of reading. His name we may call Brother Wilfrid. He is nervous. He climbed to the pulpit 5 minutes before the community came in, opened his book to the marked page, a chapter of the Lives of the Desert Fathers by Cassian, which is what is being read in the frater this fortnight, lit the small candle on the pulpit's little shelf, and now stands with his fingers on the page waiting for the abbot to bless the meal. The refectorian is Brother Cuthbert, a different Cuthbert from the young choir monk we will meet later, and a good man. His office is the frater itself. The setting of the tables, the reading, the washing of the trenchers, the sweeping and the strewing of the floor with fresh rushes every Michaelmas and Easter. Tonight he stands at the low serving hatch cut into the wall between the frater and the frater kitchen. Through the hatch 2 lay servants pass out the pottage of the evening in wooden bowls, and Cuthbert takes each bowl and sets it at the place of a brother who has just entered. The community come in. They come in their order of profession, which puts the abbot and the prior at the head table and the youngest at the far end. They stand at their places behind their benches, in silence, waiting. The abbot comes in last. He bows to the crucifix that hangs at the head of the room. He crosses to his seat. He remains standing. The whole community stands with him. Wilfrid, in the pulpit above, opens his book. There is a small silence, and then the abbot begins the grace, in Latin, in a warm low voice, and the community answers him in one voice. The grace is short. It ends with a small sung Amen. And then the community sits. Wilfrid, in the pulpit, waits for the abbot to nod to him. The abbot nods. Wilfrid begins to read. His voice, at first, is a little too fast and a little too high. That is what a first week of reading in the frater always does. After a page his voice slows. After 2 pages it settles. He is reading tonight from Cassian's Conferences, which was the reading John Cassian himself commended to the monks as the good, reading at the last hour of the day. It is why, centuries later, in every Western monastery on every ferial evening of the year, the collation is named after him. Cassian wrote a book, and every ordinary evening of every Cistercian and every Benedictine house, all through the Middle Ages, still ends with someone reading his book aloud in the frater. The meal, meanwhile, is being eaten. In front of every brother is a wooden bowl of hot pea pottage, thickened with a little oatmeal and a small handful of leeks and thyme from the physic garden. There is a piece of the day's bread. There is a small piece of hard cheese in a piece of linen. There is a wooden cup half filled with the abbey's own small beer. The choir monks eat, in this age, no meat in the frater. The rule against meat in the ordinary refectory, which by the year we stand in has been softened at many houses to a small permission for the misericord, a smaller room set apart where meat can be taken, is one of the most ancient marks of the monastic life. The daily calorie count for a choir monk has been estimated by modern scholars at somewhere between 3,000 and 3,700 calories, of which a great deal is in bread and ale. It is not a heavy meal by any modern standard. It is, however, plenty for a body that has walked a mile or 2 around the cloister and sung 5 psalms since dawn. They eat in silence and slowly. They do not speak. Any request that has to be made is made by a small sign of the hand. There is a whole quiet language of signs used in the frater in this age. It is one of the softer things about the monastic day. A brother who wants another piece of bread makes his small sign to the sub-refectorian, who is watching the tables, and the bread is at his place before he has looked up. Above them all, Wilfrid reads on. His voice is quite good once it settles. It is the voice of a young man who was raised before he came into the house by a mother who read to him from a book of prayers at bedtime. He knows how to read. He knows the pause of the sentence. He does not push. He reads a whole page. He reads another. The abbot, at his place, eats slowly, with small, clean movements. The prior beside him eats faster. The older brethren eat carefully, not to spill. The younger brethren eat quickly. The novices at the far end of the room eat as if they are still growing, which they are. Somewhere in the middle of the pottage one small dry sound. The sub-refectorian in his soft slippers has crossed to the fire at the end of the room and put a small log onto it. The log settles. A soft, warm crack. The fire brightens for a moment. It is the only sound in the room besides Wilfrid's voice. The meal ends. The abbot lays down his spoon. The community lays down its spoons in the same movement. The abbot rises. The community rises with him. Wilfrid closes his book. The abbot says the closing grace, which is short. The community answers him. The abbot bows to the crucifix. The community bows with him. The abbot turns and walks toward the door of the frater. The community turns and walks after him, in the same order they came in, each carrying his own bowl and his own cup to the little rack by the door, where the lay servants of the kitchen will collect them. At the door, the abbot pauses for a moment and looks back at the room. Wilfrid in the pulpit is coming down the little spiral stone stair, holding his book with both hands. Cuthbert the refectorian at the hatch is watching the last of the community go by. The fire at the end of the room is glowing warmly. The abbot gives Cuthbert a small nod. Cuthbert gives him a small nod back. The abbot goes out into the cloister. We go with him. And down the cloister a small lamp is moving quietly ahead of us again. It is the sub-cellarer's lantern, and it is leading the community down along the east range to the warming house, where the last soft reading of the day, the collation itself, is about to be given. That is where we go next. The frater's warmth stays behind us in the dark, and the sub-cellarer's lamp goes on quietly ahead. So we walk down the east range of the cloister behind the abbot and the sub-cellarer's lamp. The east range is the long 2-storey building on the east side of the cloister. Its lower floor holds, from the north end southward, the chapter house, then the parlour, then the day stair up to the daughter, then a small passage out to the cemetery, then the warming house. Its upper floor is the daughter itself. We will go up to the daughter in a little while. Tonight we are going into the warming house. The warming house is a single stone room. In the smaller houses it has one open central hearth, and a low bench built out from the wall on 3 sides. In the great ones, and particularly in the Cistercian houses of the north, it has a huge fireplace built into the east wall, sometimes 2, sometimes with a chimney flue rising up through the stones and out through the roof, and long stone benches worn smooth over centuries by shoulders. Tonight, in this house, the warming house has one great fireplace with a good fire in it, and long stone benches down the 2 side walls. It is the one room in the whole abbey precinct in which a fire is kindled at all through most of the year. That is not an exaggeration. In the Cistercian statutes of the 12th century, a fire could be lit in the calefactory only from the 1st of November until Easter. In some Benedictine houses the rule was a little softer, but the point of the calefactory, the calefactorium from the Latin verb to warm, was that it was a mercy. It was not a room for daily comfort. It was a room where, in the coldest weeks of the year, the community was permitted to gather for a set stretch of time and thaw their hands. Everything else in the abbey was cold. The daughter was cold. The frater was cold in winter, except for its own small hearth at the end. The cloister walks were cold. The scriptorium in the north walk had no fire at all. The writing brothers, working in the coldest months, rubbed goose grease on the tops of their tonsures against the cold, and greased their inkhorns with a smear of animal fat so that the ink did not freeze on their nibs. That grease is documented. It is one of the small kindnesses the customaries have preserved. The warming house was the balancing kindness. In the coldest hour of the coldest week of the year, the whole community came into the calefactory before Compline and stood or sat around the fire for the space of a psalm and warmed themselves. Tonight, in our early autumn evening, the fire in the warming house is a small one. It is only mildly cool outside, but the fire is on because the reading of the collation is done here at this hour, and because the fire keeps a little of the day's warmth about the community's shoulders before Compline. It is a matter of kindness, not necessity. There is a man tending the fire. His name is John le Chauffeur. John le Chauffeur is not a monk, he is a lay servant, and he is real. His name is in the abbey rolls at Selby Abbey in Yorkshire in the year 1283, listed as keeper of the calefactory fire at 3 shillings a year and 1 leather jerkin at Michaelmas. 3 shillings a year and 1 leather jerkin at Michaelmas is not a great wage. It is a small wage, but it is a documented wage paid to a documented man for a documented job. It tells us that in the abbey's own bookkeeping the calefactory fire was worth a permanent office. Somebody had to be responsible for it. Somebody had to build it, bank it, feed it, keep it clean, lay it fresh in the morning. Somebody had to know which wood burned well in a small room and which threw sparks. Somebody had to be the man at the fire when the community came in. And in the year 1283 at Selby, that man was John le Chauffeur. We are not at Selby tonight. We are somewhere else. But every abbey with a warming house had its own John, and if you will let me, we will let this abbey's man be the same John le Chauffeur, moved from Selby by the imagination for the night, to be the keeper of the fire in front of us. He is a middle-aged man. He has a long grey beard trimmed neatly. He wears a plain dun-coloured wool jerkin over a linen shirt and dark hose. He has cloth wrapped around the palm of his right hand where he handles the hot iron. He has the wrinkles around the eyes that come from watching a small hearth for many years at close range. John has been in the calefactory since after the evening meal. He has swept the hearthstone. He has laid the fire fresh. He has set out 3 small chairs, one for the abbot, one for the sub-prior, one for the abbot's own guest, which tonight is nobody. He has laid a small cushion on the abbot's chair. He has trimmed the wicks of the 2 small tallow lamps that hang on iron chains from the ceiling above the fire. He has put a small covered pot at the fire's edge, in which is a very small quantity of warm spiced wine and hot water, in case any of the older brethren need a warming cup after the reading. He has stood at his post now for half an hour, quietly, waiting. The abbot comes into the warming house first, with the prior beside him. The sub-cellarer sets his lantern in its bracket by the door. The community comes in behind, in order, and each brother finds a place on one of the long stone benches. The benches are warm, they have been sat on by the last community that came in for a warming before, and the stone has held that warmth. It is a small good. The community sits. The abbot sits in his chair by the fire. The sub-prior sits on his other side. The third chair, empty tonight, is not moved. It stands for the guest that any night might bring, so that the community sees it and remembers that Christ may sit there. A young brother, whose office this week is to read the collation, climbs onto a small wooden stool set by the wall, opens his book on his knees, and begins to read. Not from Cassian tonight. Tonight the reading is from the Lives of the Fathers, a book of the small sayings of the Desert Fathers of the early Church, which is another of the standard readings for the last hour. He reads 2 short lives, each only a paragraph, in a soft, warm voice, unhurried. The reader closes his book after 5 minutes. The community sits for a further 2 minutes in silence. John le Chauffeur at his fire pushes very softly at a log with his iron. A small warm flare. The fire settles. The community sits. Then the sub-cellarer takes up the small covered pot from the fire's edge and pours a very small quantity of the warm wine and water into 3 pewter cups, and takes them, one at a time, to the abbot, to the prior, and to the oldest brother of the community, who is a very old man in his mid-70s and cold at every hour of the year. The old brother's hands, wrapped around the warm cup, are visibly grateful. The other 2 drink theirs slowly. It is not a feast. It is a caritas, a small charity of the fire, a very small kindness. Then the abbot rises. The community rises with him. He gives the blessing. The community answers. The reader steps down from his stool. The sub-cellarer takes his lantern from its bracket, and the whole community turns toward the door of the warming house. The one who does not turn to leave is John le chauffeur. John will stay at the fire another half-hour. He will bank it now with a small spadeful of ash. He will trim the wicks of the 2 tallow lamps a last time. He will set the little pot away. He will straighten the abbot's cushion. He will sweep the hearthstone. He will lay the small pile of tomorrow morning's kindling ready. And only then will he go quietly out of the warming house, along the outer passage to the small servants' quarter behind the solarium where his own straw pallet is, and lie down. 3 shillings a year and 1 leather jerkin at Michaelmas. It is not much for a man's whole night work at a fire. It is what he has paid. It is what he takes. And he is the man who keeps this room warm for you in the dark. Remember him. He will be back again. The reading is done. The abbot rises. The whole house turns back up the cloister toward the church for the very last office of the day. The small lamp of the sub-cellarer moves quietly ahead of us again. That is where we go next. So we walk back up the east range and along the north walk of the cloister with the community in a soft, slow procession, the sub-cellarer's small lamp going quietly ahead of us again. The church, when we come back into it, is a little colder than we left it. The great candle on the altar has burned down half an inch since Vespers. The sanctuary lamp still burns above the pyx, but the choir stalls now have no candles on them, because Compline is short and by long custom is sung by heart. The community takes its places in the dark. Each brother knows his stall by touch. Aldhelm the precentor stands at his second stall on the south, waits for the abbot to be at his place, and gives the first note. Compline begins. Compline is the tenderest office of the day. In its whole shape it is a kind of tucking in. Its 4 evening psalms in the old use, 4 short psalms in the newer, are all of them psalms of trust, of the safe close of the day, of God as the shelter of the night. The community sings them slowly in one voice, in the plainest chant, on the same tone. There is no music of any complexity in Compline. It is meant to sink you. The 4 psalms end. Then the small chapter is read, which tonight is only a few short verses spoken quietly by a brother from the choir. In the plain low voice in which the reader gives it, whatever it is, it does not sound like a lesson. It sounds like an old man telling a family to lock the door before bed. Then the response, sung by all, "Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit," and then the hymn. Every compline of every night, in every Western monastery of the medieval church, ended in the same hymn. Its name is Telusis ante terminum. It is a very old hymn, attributed to Ambrose of Milan in the 4th century, in universal English use by the 8th. It is 4 short verses. It asks God, before the ending of the light, to keep the community safe from the fears of the night, to hold the dreams gentle, and to preserve in every heart the seed of prayer through sleep. If I gave you the words in the old Latin, they would sound difficult. If I gave you the words in plain English, they say only this: To thee, before the ending of the light, Creator of all things, we humbly pray, that in thy mercy thou wilt keep us safe. The community sings it in one voice. Aldhelm holds them at the pace of a slow breath. He does not push. He does not draw it out. He lets the plain, simple line of it settle over the whole church, and settle down onto the choir, and settle into the shoulders of the men beside him, and settle into your own shoulders too if you happen to be listening in the choir screen's shadow tonight. And then, at the end of it, comes the antiphon. The antiphon of Our Lady changes with the season of the year. From Advent to the Feast of the Purification, it is Alma Redemptoris Mater. From the Purification to Wednesday of Holy Week, it is Ave Regina Caelorum. From Easter to Trinity, it is Regina Caeli. And from Trinity through the whole of the long summer and autumn to Advent, which is where we stand tonight, it is Salve Regina, the great gentle Marian antiphon of the ordinary time of the year. Hail, Holy Queen, Mother of mercy, our life, our sweetness, and our hope. The community sings it in one voice, standing in the same plain chant. The Salve Regina is the last living sound in this church tonight before the great silence. It is unaccompanied. It is unhurried. It is warm in a very particular way. The community, as it sings it, faces not the altar, but the image of Our Lady in her small chapel off the north transept, where a second sanctuary lamp is kept lit. The image is a painted wooden figure with a blue mantle over her shoulders, and she has stood in that chapel for a long time, and she has heard this antiphon a great many times. The antiphon ends on a very low soft note. The community stands still. The abbot, from the second stall on the north, gives the closing blessing. It is short. It is warm. The community answers Amen in one warm sound, and that is the end of Compline. From opening antiphon to closing blessing it has taken 12 minutes. 12 minutes is the standing length of the ferial Compline. On a feast it takes 20. This is not a feast. This is a Wednesday of the ordinary time. 12 minutes. The community does not move. They stand in their stalls for a moment more in the last of the sound of the antiphon in the air. The sanctuary lamp above the pyx catches for a moment on a soft chain sway. The candle on the altar is left burning by the sub-sacrist, because the great candle burns all night, and the small lamp of the sub-cellarer waits by the door of the north transept. Then, in one movement, the community bows to the altar, and turns, and walks in single file toward the north transept door. The abbot goes last. The sacrist and the sub-sacrist stay behind for a moment, to check the candle and the lamp and set the church for the night. But the great silence has begun already. From this moment on, no monk will speak until the first word of prime tomorrow morning, unless a real need arises, and even then only in a small quiet sign, and that is where we go next. The last note of the Salve Regina dies away, and the community stands still where it is for a breath, and then the great silence begins, and we go with them out of the choir. The small lamp of the sanctuary burns on quietly behind us as we go. So the community moves out of the church into the cloister in the deep of the last blue light, in one long, slow line, and no one speaks. That is the whole thing. You would not, if you were used to seeing men come out of a church at the end of an evening service, quite know what to make of it. There is no quiet greeting to a friend. There is no small comment on the day. There is no small nod. There is not even a small brotherly touch on the shoulder from an older brother to a younger. There is only the sound of soft slippered feet on the flagstones, and the small dry sound of a habit's wide sleeve brushing the sleeve of the next brother. That is all. The great silence has begun. It is one of the oldest customs of the Benedictine and Cistercian rule. It is written down in the rule of St. Benedict in the middle of the 6th century, and by the time of our narration tonight it has been kept in every English monastic house for 700 years. From the last word of Compline until the first word of prime in the morning, no monk speaks. If a real need arises, a fire in a wing, a brother suddenly ill, a summons at the wicket, the small quiet sign language of the frater is used. In some houses a very few whispered words are permitted at the gate to a night traveller, otherwise silence. The great silence is not a rule against noise, it is a rule against speech. The bell will ring for the night office in a few hours, and no one will call it a breach of silence. The reredoter door will open and close in the night, and no one will call it a breach. A cough in the daughter is not a breach. A brother turning in his sleep and murmuring is not a breach. What is not permitted is speech, meaning one man saying to another the small ordinary sentences of the day. There is a reason for it. The rule of St. Benedict thought that speech, of all the things a man does, is the one that keeps him most tightly bound to his own attention, and his own opinion, and his own ordinary self. It thought that if a man could be given every night 10 or 11 hours in which no speech was expected of him, he would find, over the years, a great deal of room in his own head opening up. And the rule thought that whatever gentleness lives in a man is met more easily inside that room than outside it. The great silence, then, is not a punishment. It is a room. The community walks into it every evening after Compline, and walks out of it every morning after Prime, and in between, no one has to say anything. The community in one long line comes down the cloister from the north transept door. The lavatorium is set into the south walk, directly across from the frata door. It is a great long stone basin set in the cloister wall, with a run of 8 small taps of polished bronze along its face, and a long lead trough beneath it. The water for it comes from the abbey's own leat, a small diverted stream that runs down from the hills above the abbey, and is delivered by pipe into the basin. Above the basin, along a wooden rail, hang 8 fresh linen towels, laundered by the abbey's own laundry that afternoon. The community, one by one, comes to the basin and washes their hands. The abbot goes first. He turns one tap. He holds his hands under it. The water runs cold. He rubs his palms together and rubs them dry on the towel, and moves on. The prior does the same. The precentor does the same. The sub-prior does the same. Then the older brethren in order of profession one by one. Then the younger brethren. Then, at the very end, the novices. Every brother does it. Every brother does it in silence. There is one small sound at the lavatorium, and only one, the low running of the water from the taps and its gentle fall into the lead trough. If a brother sneezes, another brother will not say bless you. If a brother forgets which is his own towel, another brother will simply pass him one. It is a very calm scene. It has been done in exactly this way, in exactly this room, every night for the whole life of this abbey. There is one brother in the cloister tonight who is not going straight from the lavatorium to the day stair. His name we will call Brother Osbert. Osbert is the circuiter, the roundsman, whose name means the one who goes around. He is the night watchman of the interior discipline of the house. It is his office to walk, at intervals through the night, the whole cloister and the daughter, and the reredoter, and the frater, and the calefactory, with a small lantern, checking that the discipline is being kept, that no fire has been left burning where it should not be, and that every brother is where he ought to be. Osbert is not the man you would first pick for the role if you were casting it. He is a small, softly spoken man of 40. His hair at his tonsure is going grey. His hands are quick and precise, from a young man's training in the kitchen. He was a lay brother once in a Cistercian house on the moors, and he worked as an assistant cook for 8 years before he was drawn into the fuller life of the choir and made his second profession. He came into this house at 26 and has been the circuiter for 6 years. He has washed his hands. He has taken his lantern from its bracket by the north transept door of the cloister. He has lit the wick from the small lamp still burning above the door. And he stands now at the corner of the cloister and the daughter's day stair and lets the community go up past him one by one in silence, giving each brother the smallest gentle nod as he passes. That is Osbert's own great silence beginning. He will walk 2 rounds of the whole abbey tonight. He will walk 1 round about half an hour after the community goes to bed, to check that all the small candles in the cells have been snuffed and that no one is up in the reredoter beyond the small necessary time. He will walk a 2nd round in the small hour before the sacrist rises for the night office, to check that no one has fallen ill and that no fire in any room has crept into anything it should not. Between the 2 rounds he will sit in the parlour at the end of the east range, on the small stone bench there, with his lantern beside him, saying his own quiet prayers under his breath. 2 rounds in a Cistercian house, in a Benedictine house, sometimes 3. 10 hours or so of the great silence from the end of Compline to the first word of prime tomorrow morning in the very depth of midwinter, and 1 small lantern moving quietly, 2 or 3 times, along the whole length of the sleeping house. The community has gone up now. The last of them, a novice of about 17, passes Osbert with a small shy nod. Osbert nods back. Osbert takes up his lantern and turns toward the parlour, to sit for a while before his first round. The cloister below us is empty. The small lamp above the north transept door goes out, quietly snuffed by a hand we cannot see. And that is where we go next. Up the day stair to the daughter. The whole community is going quietly to bed above us, and the small lamps in the cells are being one by one blown out. Osbert's lantern moves quietly along the cloister toward the parlour behind us as we go. So we go up the day stair with the last of the community. The day stair is a wide stone stair that rises out of the north end of the East Range, from the cloister up to the dorter above. Its steps are worn hollow in their middles by centuries of feet. Its walls are of good stone, plastered smooth. There is a small lantern hung on an iron hook halfway up, which is left lit every night to guide the community up the stair. The lantern's small flame does not so much light the stair as give the eye a warm point to walk toward. We come up into the dorter itself. The dorter, in this period, is not the great open long room of the older Anglo-Saxon houses. By the 13th and 14th centuries, in most English monastic houses, the dorter has been subdivided by low timber partitions into a long line of small cubicles, one for each brother. Each cubicle has its own door of light wood that swings inward, and each has its own small unglazed slit window at the outer wall for a little air. Along the inner wall of each cubicle is a low bed of straw or feather mattress on a plain oak frame, a wooden chest at the foot of the bed for the brothers' few belongings, a spare habit, a comb, a prayer book, a spare pair of woolen socks, a stool, and a small rush mat on the boards by the bed. The whole cubicle is perhaps 8 feet long by 5 feet wide. It is small. It is enough. Above each door is the brother's small pewter number, incised with the number of his stall in the choir. That way, the reader in the dorter, the small officer who keeps the dorter and lays the beds, knows which cell belongs to which brother, and the sub-sacrist knows which door to knock on if he has to wake one brother before another. The whole dorter is perhaps 100 feet long. It has a plain plaster ceiling, and along its length, at intervals, there are small alcoves in the wall where a lamp can be set for the whole aisle. Tonight only one lamp is lit near the day stair, and it is set to burn very low. It is enough to see the aisle by if you are a brother coming back from the rear dorter in the middle of the night. It is not enough to read by. The dorter in this age is not a place for reading. The novice master is standing at the head of the dorter aisle, at the top of the day stair. His name we may call Brother Eldred. Eldred is a gentleman in his mid-50s. He has been a monk in this house since he was 17. He was made novice master 8 years ago. He has, at any given time, 3 or 4 novices under his care who sleep at the far end of the dorter in the smaller cell set aside for them. Tonight he has 3. 2 boys of 16 who came in a year ago, and 1 boy of just under 17 who came in only 3 weeks ago. The 3 of them are with him now at the head of the aisle. The 2 older boys are used to the dorter. They walk past Ealdred with a small nod and go straight to their cells. The new boy, whose name we may call Cuthbert, the same Cuthbert the blueprint spoke of, has not quite got used to it. He looks a little frightened, not of anything in particular, of the darkness of the long dorter aisle, of the strangeness of going to bed in a small wooden cell with a low door beside a long line of strange men. Ealdred sees his look. Ealdred puts his hand on the boy's shoulder for a moment. That is not a breach of the silence, because it is a small kindness within a permitted moment, and the touch itself is a permitted sign in the small language of the community. Ealdred's hand rests on the boy's shoulder just long enough for the boy to draw a slow breath. Then Ealdred turns the boy gently by the shoulder toward the far end of the aisle, and walks him down the length of it in silence, and shows him to his cell, and pulls back the linen sheet on the bed a small hand's width, so that the bed looks inviting, and lays the boy's spare habit over the stool and gives him a small nod, and steps back out of the cell and pulls the door quietly to. The boy stands for a moment in the cell. Then he takes off his sandals one by one and sets them under the bed. He does not take off his habit. He does not take off his belt or the cord at his waist or the small knife he wears at his belt for practical use. This is the deep rule. The deep rule, the rule that governs the sleeping of the monks, was written down in the 22nd chapter of the Rule of St. Benedict in the middle of the 6th century, and it has never really been changed since. It says this: let them sleep clothed and girt with belts and cords, so that they may be ready to rise without delay when the signal is given. The rule was given so that when the bell went for the night office in the very deep of the night, no brother would waste the 10 minutes that dressing takes. Every brother, in every Western Benedictine and Cistercian and Cluniac house in Europe, from the 6th century to the 15th, went to bed dressed and belted, so that when the bell went he could rise, put on his sandals, and be at his stall in the choir in the space of a few slow breaths. The rule is not gentle. It is the sound of a real disciplined life, but if you sit inside it for a moment, you will see that it is also very kind. It saves a young monk from the small cold work of dressing at 2:30 on a February morning. It lets him keep the deepest possible sleep for the deepest possible number of hours. It lets him rise, put on his sandals, come out into the aisle, walk to the day stair, come down and be in the choir, and be singing before he's really awake. It is one of the tenderest small mercies in the rule. So the boy in his cell lies down on his side on the straw mattress, in his habit with his belt still on, and pulls the wool blanket up to his shoulder, and turns his face toward the wall, and closes his eyes. Along the aisle, one by one, the small candles in the cells go out. Every brother, when he lies down, snuffs his own small candle. In some cells the candle was never lit because the brother is old and knows his cell in the dark by long practice. In some cells the candle was lit only for a moment to see the bed. But at the end of 5 minutes, no candles are burning in the daughter at all. Only the one small lamp at the head of the aisle burns on very low. Eldred, at the head of the aisle, looks the whole length of it one last time. He listens. He hears 3 or 4 small settling sounds. A cough, a stool shifted, a wool blanket pulled up, a brother turning onto his side, then a stillness. He nods to himself. He walks slowly down the aisle himself and turns into his own cell at the far end near the novices. He shuts his own door. He too lies down clothed. He too pulls his blanket up. The whole daughter breathes together in the dark. And that is where we go next, down into the first sleep of the community, before the sacrist comes to wake them again. The small lamp at the head of the daughter aisle burns on very low behind us as we go. So the community is asleep. You would notice, if you stood at the head of the aisle now, that the whole daughter has fallen into one soft breathing. That is what 50 men breathing in their sleep in a long stone room sounds like. It is not silence. It is a low, warm, even sound. 100 breaths in 100 small overlapping rhythms, so nothing of the whole ever stops, and nothing of the whole ever pushes forward. The first sleep of the medieval monastic night is the treasured sleep. It is not the sleep of a man who has been up for 18 hours and dropped exhausted into bed. It is the sleep of a man who has been up for 14 hours and gone to bed at 8 in the evening, because the bell will ring for him again at 2:30 in the morning, and he will be up on his feet in the very deep of the night singing. The first sleep is what carries him through it. It is 4 to 6 hours long, deep, uninterrupted, blessed by the last office of the day and the great silence around him. The medieval mind knew what this sleep was worth. It is one of the reasons the rule of St. Benedict was so particular about Compline being warm and short and sung on the same tone. Compline was not for teaching. Compline was to sink you. When Compline had done its work, the monk went up the day stair already half asleep, and lay down, and was gone. The whole abbey, at this hour, is quiet in this same way. In the guest hall by the outer gate, the small hearth is still burning low, and Adam the guest master is asleep on his mat in the corner. If a traveller knocks at the wicket bell will ring, and the young lay servant asleep by the door will jump up and run for Adam. But no bell has rung tonight. Adam sleeps. At the gatehouse, Brother Edmund the porter has not gone to sleep in his little bed yet. Edmund does not sleep in the first hour of the first watch, because there are still travellers on the road at this hour of the evening, and the wicket may yet ring. He sits on his stool by the wicket, his prayer book on his knees, his lantern burning quietly beside him. In another hour, if no knockers come, he will lie down. In the outer court, the smith and the baker have both gone to their own cottages beyond the outer wall, because they are not vowed men. Their fires are banked. The stable is warm and quiet, and the pony from the North Grange that Wulfric of the Lay Brothers rubbed down is asleep on her side in the straw. In the Lay Brothers' daughter along the West Range, the 12 Lay Brothers who ate their evening meal in the West Range Frata a few hours ago are asleep on their own straw pallets, 12 breathings together on a long low floor. Their day starts at 3:30 tomorrow morning, which is why they went to bed so early. Wulfric of the North Grange is among them, asleep on his side with his hand under his cheek. In the small servants' quarter behind the solarium, John le Chauffeur is asleep on his own straw pallet, in his dun-coloured jerkin, his little leather cap over the crown of his head, his breath even. His fire in the warming house is banked with a spadeful of ash and glowing quietly red under it. In the infirmary in its own small court there is one lamp still burning, and one lay brother still awake, sitting by the bed of a very old choir monk who has been very ill for a long time. But we will go to them later, for now they are quiet. In the abbot's own lodging, in the little corner room at the south end of the East Range, the abbot has gone to his own small bed and is asleep. His own private lamp has been snuffed. In every cell of the daughter, every choir monk is asleep. And in the church one small light burns. That is the sanctuary lamp above the pyx above the high altar. It has burned every hour of every day and every night since the church was consecrated. In some houses of this period it was pure beeswax, and in some it was a small oil lamp, and in some, at Durham Cathedral Priory, the Rites of Durham later remembered that there was always a wax candle burning day and night before the shrine of St. Cuthbert, which was never suffered to go out. Never suffered to go out. That is the phrase. Whatever else was in that church, whatever else was happening in the abbey, whatever else was happening in the country, that lamp burned. Tonight it burns quietly on its long chain above the pyx, and that is really the whole abbey now, a house of about 50 vowed men, another 100 servants and lay brothers, all of them asleep in one part or another of the enclosure, and one small lamp burning in the empty church. You would notice, if you stood on the little rise beyond the outer wall and looked at the abbey now, that it is almost invisible in the dark. The great tower is a darker shape against the sky. The long ranges of the cloister are a dark line. Only 2 small warm points are visible. One is Edmund's lantern above his gatehouse, still burning. One is the sanctuary lamp inside the church, seen through the western lancet as a small warm speck. 2 small lamps in the whole abbey precinct. Everything else is dark, and in the dark everything is sleeping. The shortest first sleep in the whole of the medieval monastic year was in high summer, when the light held late and the community went to bed at 9 or past. On such a summer night, if the abbot rose at 3, the first sleep was only 4 hours, and it was not enough, and the community felt it. That is one of the reasons the summer horarium in most houses was gentler about the second sleep. On the ordinary Wednesday of our early autumn tonight, though, Compline has been sung at 8, and the sacrist will not rise until about 2:30, and so the first sleep tonight will be a full 6 hours. That is the sleep the whole abbey is now taking, and, if you will let me, the sleep you are now taking with them. Above the abbey, the sky is very deep dark blue, with the stars very sharp and very small. The bright band of the summer river of stars runs from the southwest to the northeast across the tower. A very old owl in the abbey woodyard on a low branch of an elm opens one eye at the sound of a small movement in the hay, and then closes it again. The small lamp of the sanctuary burns on quietly in the church. The small lamp of the gatehouse burns on quietly at the gate. Everyone is asleep, and so the shortest hour of the night is coming on now. Somewhere at the far end of the daughter one small movement begins. The sacrist is stirring. In a moment he will rise and light his own small lamp, and come down the day stair alone, and go into the church, and light the great candle and strike the bell. That is where we go next. The small lamp of the sanctuary burns on quietly in the church behind us as we go. So we go down the length of the daughter to the sacrist's cell. The sacrist's cell is like the others. A low door, a straw mattress on an oak frame, a wooden chest at the foot, a stool, a small unglazed slit window. Above the door, in a pewter number, the sacrist's stall number. The cell is at the north end of the dorter nearest the day stair because the sacrist rises before the community, and every step he takes to get to the church has to be quiet. His name we may call Brother Anselm. Anselm is 30 years old. He came into the house at 19, was professed at 23, and was made sacrist 4 years ago on the death of the old sacrist. He is still, on some nights, faintly frightened of the empty church in the middle of the night. He has not told anyone this, and he never will. He knows that in another 5 years he will not be frightened of it any more, and he knows that the way to that other side is simply to keep going into it night after night, quietly, until the strangeness has worn off. He was awake before the bell was going to ring, because he trained himself years ago to wake at the right hour by long habit. He lies for a moment on his side in his habit in the dark. He listens. He hears the daughter breathing. He hears somewhere far off outside the outer wall one late owl. He turns onto his back, sits up slowly, swings his legs over the side of the bed, and puts his sandals on. He does not stand up straight away. He sits for the space of 2 slow breaths and lets his head clear. Then he stands. He takes his own small brass lamp from the chest at the foot of the bed. It is a small closed lamp of the kind the abbey's own smith makes, with a hinged door on one side to open the flame to the wick, and a small ring at the top so it can be carried. He opens the door. He takes his flint and steel from a small pocket inside the sleeve of his habit. He strikes the flint against the steel over the small tinder ball in the palm of his hand. A soft red spark falls onto the tinder. He blows it very gently. The tinder catches. He lifts the wick of his lamp to the tinder and the wick takes, and the small warm flame comes up inside the closed brass door, and he closes the door softly. The whole small lighting has taken less than 1 minute. He has done it 1,000 times. He steps out of his cell into the aisle. He pulls the door quietly to behind him. He walks the length of the dorter alone. You would notice, if you were with him, that his walk is slow and even, and does not vary its pace. He does not hurry. He does not creep. He walks. The small lamp in his hand casts a soft, warm circle of light around him, and moves the shadows of the cell doors on either side of the aisle as he goes. Behind him, one by one, the doors of the aisle become dark again. Ahead of him, one by one, they come into a soft, warm light, and then fade. The small lamp, going quietly from door to door. He comes to the head of the aisle, and to the day stair. He starts down. The day stair in the dark is a well of moving shadow around one small warm circle of moving light. Anselm goes down it slowly, one hand on the stone wall for balance. The lantern hung on the wall halfway down the stair, the one left burning to guide the community up, is still burning. He passes it. He reaches the bottom of the stair and steps out into the East Range passage. He turns left toward the cloister and the north transept door. At the corner of the cloister he stops for a moment. Osbert the circuiter is sitting on the small stone bench at the door of the parlour, saying his own quiet prayers. Anselm gives Osbert a small nod. Osbert gives Anselm a small nod back. Anselm walks on. He goes down the east walk of the cloister toward the north transept door. The cloister at this hour is very cold, because it's open to the sky through the arcades. The stone under Anselm's sandals is like ice. His small lamp moves along in front of him. The cloister's dark stone comes into a small warm light and fades again. He reaches the north transept door. He opens it. He steps into the church. The church in the middle of the night is a very great room of moving dark. Only 2 lights are burning. One is the sanctuary lamp above the pyx above the high altar, at the far east end, a soft warm point in the deep dark. The other is Anselm's own small lamp in his hand. Anselm walks up the north aisle toward the sanctuary. His steps are soft. He does not hurry. He is used to the darkness of the church at this hour because he has walked it every night for 4 years. But he still walks it slowly and gives it the kind of attention that means the church knows he is coming in. He goes up the presbytery steps. He crosses to the altar. He stands for a moment before the altar and bows deeply, and crosses himself quietly. Then he sets his own small lamp on the sanctuary floor beside the altar, and reaches up and lights, from the sanctuary lamp above the pyx, a small altar taper. The sanctuary lamp is still burning, of course. It has burned every hour of every day since the church was consecrated 65 years ago. It has never gone out. It will not go out tonight. Anselm carries the small altar taper across the presbytery and lights the great altar candle from it. The great candle is a beeswax candle of 1 pound weight. A 1 pound beeswax altar candle at rest in still air will burn between 14 and 16 hours. This one, lit for Vespers earlier this evening and pinched out by the sub-sacrist afterwards, has burned 1.5 inches in that time, and will now be lit again for the night office and burn until Lauds is over, and probably until the second sleep, and then be pinched out for the day and lit again for prime in the morning mass. It is one of the abbey's small habitual little lights. Anselm blows out the taper. He goes back to the choir. He walks along the north side of the choir and lights, from his own small lamp, each of the little tallow candles set out on the choir stools for the singers to read their antiphonaries by. Each candle takes a moment. He does not hurry. When he has lit the last of the small candles on the north side of the choir, he crosses to the south side and does the same. In all, it takes him about 4 minutes. The choir is now lit. The great candle burns on the altar. The sanctuary lamp burns above the pyx. 20 small tallow candles burn along the choir stalls. The whole church is warm with them, in the small clean way that a church becomes warm with candles. The sanctuary lamp is burning. The fire in the warming house is banked. Somewhere in the dark a hand is keeping a small light. Anselm goes to the crossing and stops beneath the low central tower. Above him, in the tower, hangs the abbey's smallest bell, the Compline bell on its short oak yoke. Beside the bell hangs a small hemp rope that comes down through a hole in the tower ceiling, to a height a man can reach. The rope has a small leather handle on the end. Anselm takes the handle. He pulls the rope once. The bell rings. It is a small, clear, bright sound. It goes out through the tower louvres and into the cold blue dark of the outer air, and rolls down along the tiled roofs of the cloister, and out over the outer wall and away down the valley. The community, in the dorter above the cloister, in one movement, wakes. That is where we go next. The small lamp Anselm brought down the day stair still burns quietly by the choir stalls behind us as we go. So we go back into the dorter to watch the community rise. You would notice, first, that at the second bell there is a small quiet movement in every cell along the aisle. It is not a sudden thing. It is a slow, soft settling out of sleep. A brother sits up on the edge of his bed. He puts his hand up to his tonsure to rub the sleep out of the crown of his head. He puts his sandals on. He stands. He crosses himself. He steps out of his cell into the aisle. Along the whole aisle, 47 other brothers do the same. At the far end of the dorter, at the head of the aisle, is the sub-sacrist, who is Anselm's assistant, and whose office is to be at the head of the aisle when the community rises for the night office, and to walk down the aisle in the last movement to gently touch the shoulder of any brother who has slept through the bell. Tonight no one has slept through. The sub-sacrist stands with his own small lamp lit, ready to catch a stray, and no stray comes. The community moves quietly down the aisle in one long, slow procession. At the head of the aisle they turn, not into the day stair, which they came up by, but into a smaller door in the east wall of the dorter. It is the door to the night stair. The night stair is one of the most touching structures in English monastic building. It is a narrow stone stair that goes down from the dorter directly into the south transept of the church, so that the community, when the bell goes for the night office in the very deep of the night, does not have to go out into the cold cloister and along it in the dark to the north transept door and up the north aisle to the choir. Instead, the community goes down the night stair, which lands right at the door of the south transept of the church, right at the choir stall side, so that a brother is in his stall in half the time he would be otherwise, in a fifth of the walk, and without ever going outside. The night stair was built into the abbey plan from the beginning. It was thought about. Someone in the 12th century, looking at the plan of the cloister and the church, said, "This must be shorter, at 3 in the morning in February." And so, off the daughter's east wall, a small dedicated door was cut, and behind it a narrow stone stair was built to come down into the south transept behind the choir stalls. If you visit a ruined English abbey today, you can still walk up and down the night stair at several of them. The one at Hexham Priory in Northumberland still stands, and is still walked by any visitor. The one at Bristol Cathedral is still walked, and the great flight of steps that comes down from the daughter's east wall into the south transept at Fountains, and the ones at Rievaulx, are still there for anyone who wants to see. The most touching thing about the night stair is what the medieval feet did to the stone. If you go and look at the night stair at Rievaulx, or at Hexham today, you will see that in the middle of each step there is a hollow. The hollow is soft, it is smooth, it is glassy. It has been made over 600 years of nightly use by the bare and sandalled feet of the community going down. Every night, twice a night in some seasons, 40 or 50 or 100 men came down these stairs. Every stone got soft under them. Every stair in the middle has that hollow now. The stone has been made warmer by the feet, in that literal and very medieval sense of the word warmer, which is to say more human. The stair is not a stair anymore. It is the sum of every foot that has ever walked it. The community tonight comes down that stair. Anselm is standing at the foot of it, in the south transept, with his own small lamp lit, and gives each brother a small nod as he comes down. It is a very gentle small ritual. Each brother, coming out of his own sleep, coming down the worn stair, comes at the foot of it into a small warm circle of lamplight and a small warm nod from Anselm. It's like being greeted by a friend at a door. It is what greets you when you get back to somewhere you belong. The abbot comes down first, because the abbot always comes down first, and Anselm gives him a small nod, and the abbot gives him a small nod back, and the abbot goes to his second stall on the north side of the choir. The prior comes down after him, then Aldhelm the precentor, then Osbert the circuiter, who has come up from the parlour to sing with the rest of the community, then the older brethren in order of profession one by one, then the younger, then at the very end the 3 novices walking gently holding on to the wall. Cuthbert, the new novice, comes down slowly. He is holding the wall with his right hand. He has never done this before. He has been told about it. He has been walked through it during the day by Eldred, the novice master. He has practised coming down the stair once in the middle of a morning, so he would know where the hollow of each step is. Eldred is walking behind him now, 1 step above, ready to steady him if he stumbles. Cuthbert does not stumble. He reaches the foot of the stair. Anselm gives him a small nod. Cuthbert gives him a small nod back. Cuthbert goes to his own small stall at the far end of the south side of the choir. Eldred comes down after him. Anselm nods. Eldred nods back. Eldred goes to his own stall. Every last brother is now in his stall. The night stair behind them stands empty. The sub-sacrist at the top of the stair has closed the door-to-door quietly behind the last of them. Anselm quietly comes across the presbytery and picks up his own small lamp and takes it to the sacristy and sets it in its bracket on the wall there, where it will burn quietly through the night office. He comes back to his own stall on the south side of the choir. The precentor gives the first note. The night office is about to begin. That is where we go next. The night stair behind us, worn glassy smooth by 600 years of feet, stands quietly empty in the dark. The small lamp of the sacristy burns on quietly behind us as we go. So the community is in the choir. The choir at this hour in the middle of the night is a very different room from the choir at Vespers. At Vespers, the church still had the last light of the day in its west windows, and the community was warm from the frater and the day's work. Now, at nocturnes, the church is at its deepest cold. The west windows are as black as the east. The community has come from 4 hours of first sleep, and the choir is lit only by 20 small tallow candles on the stalls, and 1 great candle on the altar, and 1 sanctuary lamp burning above the pyx. But the community is singing anyway. That is the whole extraordinary fact of the night office. 50 men have come down from bed at 2:30 in the morning in a stone church at the coldest hour of the coldest room of the coldest house in the valley, and they're standing at their stalls in the dark to sing to God for an hour. There is no other way to say it. This has been going on in this house for 65 years. In some other English houses, it has been going on for 200, 300, 500 years. In the community's own understanding of what it is doing, it has been going on since the time of the Desert Fathers in the 4th century, and it will go on until the world ends. Nothing is being announced, nothing is being explained, nothing is being got through. The community is standing here in the dark because at this hour of the night the whole world is asleep, and someone has to keep the office of praise open on behalf of it. Aldhelm the precentor gives the first note. The night office begins. The opening blessing is short and the community answers. Then the abbot sings, in his low warm voice from his second stall on the north, the small opening versicle called the Deus in Adiutorium, the ancient prayer that God would come to his aid, and the whole community answers him in one voice. Every office of every day and every night in every Western monastery in every century since the 6th begins with this same versicle. It is the small door the office opens through. The community in one voice then sings the doxology of glory, in plain chant, in Latin, unhurried. And then, at once, without pause, the invitatory psalm. The invitatory psalm is Psalm 94, the psalm that begins Venite exultemus Domino. O come, let us sing to the Lord. It is the psalm that stands, in the Latin office, at the head of every night office in every Western monastery every night of the year. It is sung with a small antiphon between its verses, and the antiphon changes with the season and the day. Tonight's antiphon is the one for an ordinary Wednesday of the autumn, a short warm phrase in the plain chant. The community sings the antiphon. Aldhelm gives the note for the first verse of Psalm 94, and the north side of the choir takes it, and sings the first verse in unison, and then the south side takes the second verse, and so back and forth across the presbytery, verse by verse, with the small antiphon coming back between them, until the whole psalm has been sung through. Psalm 94 in the Latin is not a very long psalm. It takes about 6 or 7 minutes to sing at the community's steady pace, with the antiphon returning. If you were sitting in the shadow of the choir screen listening to it, you would notice that after 2 or 3 verses your breath would settle into the same rhythm as the choir's breath. You would notice that your shoulders would drop. You would notice that the room around you had become smaller and warmer, not larger and colder. This is what the plain chant does. It is one of the calmest sounds in the Western world, and it works on the listener the way a mother's low voice works on a child who is trying to sleep. The invitatory ends. The community stands still for a small breath. The 8 canonical hours of the day, matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline, are the whole clock the medieval monastic life is kept by. We are at the middle of them now, in the very deep of the night, and there are 2 whole hours of office to come. The community knows this. The community has stood in exactly this place, at exactly this hour, 1,200 times this year, and every year of every choir monk's whole life. There is no impatience anywhere in the choir. Every man is ready to be here for as long as it takes. Aldhelm gives the note for the first of the 12 psalms of the ferial night. That is where we go next. The invitatory ends, and the choir turns into the first psalm of the first nocturne, and the sound of the 12 psalms of the ferial night begins to run through the church. The great candle on the altar burns on quietly behind us as we go. So the ferial night office in the Benedictine cursus has, at its heart, 12 psalms. The number is not arbitrary. When St. Benedict wrote his rule in the middle of the 6th century, he set out, in chapters 9 and 10 of his rule, exactly which psalms should be sung in each nocturne on each day of the week, and the count came to 12. He divided the 12 into 2 groups of 6, calling them the 2 nocturnes of the ordinary night. And he set out that on a Sunday or a great feast the office should have 3 nocturnes of 4 psalms each, giving 12 again, and that on the feast the readings should be 9, 3 in each nocturne, and that on the ferial the readings should be 3. The community tonight sings the ferial 12. They sing the first 6 as the first nocturne. Between the psalms of the first nocturne, at the appointed places, there are small antiphons. Between the whole first nocturne and the whole second nocturne there are 3 readings, taken from a lectern that stands in the middle of the presbytery. Each reading is given by an old brother, standing at the lectern with the great heavy book open in front of him, in the plain, warm reading voice that these men have been trained in all their lives. The reader of the second lesson tonight is Brother Godric. Godric is a very old brother. He is 71. He has been in this house since he was 17. He has been in the choir every day for 54 years. He has sung the whole Psalter through in the Benedictine cursus something over 3,000 times in his life. He knows the whole 150 psalms by heart in the Latin. He knows every antiphon in the year. He knows every reading. He is not a scholar. He is a man who has been formed by an office. The office runs in his blood. Godric walks slowly from his stall to the lectern. He is a little bent now. His hands on the lectern are large and steady and old. His hair at his tonsure is snow-white. His voice, when he begins to read, is low and very gentle and very slow. He reads on for 2 paragraphs, in that warm, slow voice, and the whole church listens. He closes the book. He gives a small nod to the presbytery. He walks slowly back to his stall. The choir sings the responsory that follows the reading. The responsory is a small song of 2 or 3 verses, sung by a soloist and answered by the choir. Tonight the soloist is a young brother of about 25, and his voice is very clear and warm. The community answers him in one voice. Then the second nocturne begins. The community sings the next 6 of the 12 psalms. They sing them in the same steady, unhurried way. Between them the small antiphons return. After them, the second set of 3 readings from the same book. After them, another responsory. It is at this point in the night office that a certain kind of very deep calm settles over the whole church. 50 men have been standing in their stalls for something like 40 minutes now. The plain chant has been running the whole time, in one voice, in one long unbroken rhythm. Nothing has been rushed, nothing has been dwelt on. The whole thing is being carried at the pace of a slow breath, and by the second nocturne, if you are a monk in that choir, you have stopped thinking about anything else. There is only this. There is only the psalm you're singing at this moment, and the antiphon you're about to sing, and the reading you're about to hear, and the responsory that will answer it. This is the state the whole medieval discipline of the night office was designed to bring a man to. It is not a state of striving. It is a state of rest. The office does the work and the man is carried by it. The sanctuary lamp is burning. The fire in the warming house is banked. Somewhere in the dark a hand is keeping a small light. The 12th psalm of the ferial night is sung. The final responsory is sung. The choir stands still for a moment. 50 minutes have passed. That is the standing length of ferial nocturnes in the Benedictine cursus, from opening blessing to closing responsory. On a feast with 9 lessons, it runs well over an hour. Tonight, on our ordinary Wednesday, it has been 50 minutes. The choir breathes. Then, without a pause, without any small ceremony, without any small announcement, Aldhelm gives the first note of the transition to Lauds. That is where we go next. The last responsory of nocturnes dies quietly away, and the choir turns straight on into the office of the first light, and the community stands where it is and sings on. The sanctuary lamp burns on quietly above the pyx behind us as we go. So the choir moves from nocturnes straight into Lauds. In some houses, in some observances, there was a small interval between the 2 offices. In the great Cluniac Abbey of Cluny in Burgundy, in the winter months, there was even a short second sleep taken between them, called the interstitium. The community went back up the day stair to bed for the space of half an hour or so, and then came down again for Lauds. It was one of the reasons Cluny was famous for the gentleness of its rule. In most English houses in this period the interstitium was not taken. Nocturnes ran straight into Lauds. There was a small pause of a slow breath, a small trimming of the candles by Anselm the sacrist, and then Aldhelm gave the note and Lauds began. Tonight it is that pattern. Anselm has come quietly from the sacristy across the choir. He walks along the north side of the choir and along the south side, snuffing each of the small tallow candles that have burned down through the night office, and lighting fresh ones from a small taper. It is quick work. He does not hurry. He has done this hundreds of times. He does not touch the great candle on the altar. The great candle burns on. He does not touch the sanctuary lamp above the pyx. The sanctuary lamp burns on. He goes back to the sacristy and sets his taper in its bracket, and comes back out into the choir and stands quietly for a moment at his own stall on the south side. Aldhelm gives the first note of Lauds. The community, without moving, sings. Lauds is the office of the first light. It is one of the most ancient offices of the Christian day. In some accounts it goes back to the practice of the earliest church, of Christians rising in the deep of the night to keep the vigil, and singing as the first grey came into the sky. In the Western monastic office by the medieval period, Lauds always followed nocturnes, and always ended as the first light was in the Eastern lancets. The two offices together made the whole of the night's prayer. Tonight, Lauds is short. It has an opening antiphon, then the fixed psalms of Lauds, Psalm 66, then Psalm 50, then a psalm proper to the day, then a canticle from Scripture, then the three great psalms of praise, 148, 149, and 150. Then the small chapter, then the hymn, then the Benedictus, the song of Zechariah from the first chapter of the Gospel of Luke, which is the chief canticle of Lauds every day of the year, then a collect, then the closing. The community sings it all. While they sing, if you look at the eastern lancets above the high altar, you will see that the very first change in them has begun to happen. They are not black anymore. They have gone to a very deep dark grey. There is not yet any colour in them. There is only the first small suggestion that beyond them there is a world, and that in that world there is a sky, and that above the sky there is a light beginning to come from a very long way off. In another 20 minutes the grey will have brightened. In another 40 it will have picked up the first faint tint of gold at the horizon. In another hour the eastern lancets will be full of the first proper light of the morning, and the great candle on the altar will look small and yellow beside them, and the sanctuary lamp will look very small. But for now the church is still deep in the dark of the last watch of the night. The community sings on. Aldhelm at his stall gives the note for each psalm quietly and steadily. The community answers him. The plain chant runs on, in one voice, at the pace of a slow breath. You would notice at this hour that the sound of the choir has changed a little from the sound at nocturnes. At nocturnes the voices were only just up from sleep, and there was a small edge of clearing throats and settling shoulders. Now, at Lauds, the voices are settled. They have been singing for the best part of an hour. They have found their common breath. The plain chant runs like a very slow river. The Benedictus rises. The Benedictus is the chief canticle of Lauds every day of the year. It is the song Zechariah sings at the birth of his son John the Baptist, in the first chapter of the Gospel of Luke, and it is one of the great morning canticles of the Western Church. It is a warm song. It is a song of the morning. And by convention, every abbey in the Western Church sings it standing. Tonight the abbey sings the Benedictus in the plain chant, standing unhurried, in one warm voice. The Benedictus ends, the collect follows. The collect is a short prayer that gathers up the whole of the office and offers it to God in one short warm sentence. The abbot gives it. The community answers Amen. The office is closed. The community bows to the altar. Aldhelm gives no more notes. The candles on the choir stalls are gently pinched out one by their singers. The great candle on the altar is left burning. The sanctuary lamp burns on above the pyx. The community turns. The eastern lancets are now a paler grey than they were. but they are still a long way from morning. The whole community will now go back up the day stair to the daughter for a further hour of sleep before prime and the day's work. That is the second sleep. It is one of the gentle mercies of the horarium. But before we go with them, let us go for one whole movement of the night, out of the choir and across the cloister to the rooms where the whole night is being kept in other ways. The infirmary and the scriptorium, and the great kitchen, and the west range of the lay brothers, and the small lamp of the circuiter still moving through the cloister, and the porter Edmund back at his gate. All of them have been keeping their own night through nocturnes and lauds. Now for a while we go and stand with them. That is where we go next. The small oil lamp in the sacristy burns on quietly beside its bracket behind us as we go. So we go out of the church, out through the north transept door, along the north walk of the cloister, and then out through a smaller door in the east range that leads to the infirmary court. The infirmary is set a little apart from the main cloister. It has its own small enclosed court, with a small garden of physic herbs, and a small chapel of its own kitchen, and its own small freighter. The whole reason for this arrangement, in the medieval monastic plan, was to give the sick and the very old their own quieter life within the abbey. They did not have to walk the whole length of the cloister for their meals. They did not have to stand for the whole of nocturnes. They were allowed meat, which was forbidden in the main frater. They were allowed a small fire kept in their hall. They were allowed to be woken gently in the morning, or not at all. The infirmary was, in a real sense, the abbey's own kindness to itself. Tonight the infirmary has 3 men in it. 2 of them are middle-aged brothers home from a long journey to the abbey's northern grange, who came in yesterday evening exhausted, and were sent by the infirmarian straight to the infirmary hall for 2 days of rest and warm food and no offices. They are asleep in their small cells at the north end of the hall, and the third in the small cell at the south end nearest the fire is a very old choir monk who has been very ill for a long time. His name we may call Brother Hugh. Hugh is 79. He came into this house at 15. He has been in it for 64 years. He was novice master here for 12 years. He was sub-prior for 8. He was briefly prior. He gave up the office of prior 15 years ago on account of his health, and has been at his stall in the choir every day since, until this last spring, when he began to fail. He has been in the infirmary now for 4 months. He is not going to leave it. He is not in pain. That is one of the small mercies. The infirmarian has been giving him, at intervals, a warm herbal draught from the abbey's own physics garden, and it holds him quiet through the night. He sleeps a great deal. When he is awake, he is peaceful. He is asleep now. Beside his bed is a small stool. On the stool sits a lay brother. The lay brother's name we may call Brother Hild. He is one of the lay brothers who has, for the last 4 years, been the infirmarian's assistant. His office is to sit with the sick at night. In some houses, there was a specific corner of the infirmary hall set aside for a lay brother's truckle bed, so that a very sick brother would never wake without company. In this house, Hild has his straw pallet at the foot of the small cell, and he sleeps in short stretches through the night, and rises whenever Hugh stirs. Hild is a small quiet man of 50. He came into the house at 32. He was, in the world outside, a saddler in a small market town, and his hands are the strong, careful hands of a man who worked leather for many years. He tends Hugh the way he used to fit a bridle on a very old horse, slowly, gently, watching for what the old creature would find easiest. He has just done a small thing. Hugh, in his sleep, half woke a few minutes ago and pushed the wool blanket down a little way off his shoulder. His shoulder in the small cell was cold. Hild, at the small movement, opened his eyes on his own straw pallet, sat up, came to the bed, drew the blanket softly up over the shoulder again, and sat down on the stool by the bed. Then he reached across to the small hearth at the wall. The infirmary keeps its small fires all night, another of the small kindnesses, and took, with a cloth wrapped around his palm, a small warm stone that had been sitting in the fire's edge all evening. He wrapped the stone in a piece of woolen cloth. He lifted the blanket at the foot of the bed, laid the warmed stone at Hugh's feet, and drew the blanket down over it again. That is one of the tenderest small offices of the medieval infirmary. A warmed stone at the feet of a very old man in the deep of a cold night. It is not written down in any customary as a specific rule. It is what the infirmary lay brother does at 3 a.m, because he has seen the old man's shoulder come out from under the blanket and knows the old man is a little cold, and there is a warm stone in the fire's edge, and Hild is here, and Hugh is asleep, and no one is going to speak of it. Hild sits back down on the stool. He's not sleeping. He's not exactly awake either. He's in that half state of the night watcher who has settled into his watch. His breath is slow. His hands are folded in his lap. Beside him, on a small ledge in the wall, a small oil lamp burns very low. Its wick is trimmed. Its flame gives just enough light to see Hugh's face by, and no more. If Hugh should stir, Hild will see. If Hugh should speak, Hild will hear. The sanctuary lamp is burning. The fire in the warming house is banked. Somewhere in the dark a hand is keeping a small light. Beyond the cell, in the infirmary hall itself, the 2 brothers home from the journey are asleep with a small oil lamp trimmed low over their beds too. Beyond the hall, in the infirmary chapel, a small sanctuary lamp of the infirmary's own burns quietly above the small altar. The whole small quiet world of the infirmary is holding through the night, one lamp at a time, one keeper at a time. Somewhere far off, faintly through the stones, the community's plain chant of Lauds is still running in the choir. Hild lifts his head a little at the sound, and turns his face toward it, and listens for a moment. Then he lowers his head again, and folds his hands, and waits. He will sit here until the very first grey comes into the small window at the wall, which is another 2 hours off, and then he will slip quietly out of the cell to bring back a small piece of the morning bread from the infirmary kitchen, and warm a little water for Hugh's morning cup, and let the infirmarian know how Hugh has slept, and take his own straw pallet up and go quietly to his own small pallet in the lay brother's end of the infirmary for the 2 hours of his own sleep. He is one of the abbey's night keepers. He is not named in any chronicle. He does not appear in any charter. His pay is very small. He is not going to be an abbot. He is not going to be anything in the record. What he is going to do is sit here tonight and lay a warmed stone at Hugh's feet, and see the shoulder covered, and see the wick of the lamp trimmed, and be here so that Hugh does not wake alone. Hild rises. Along the passage from the infirmary hall there is another small cell, still further to the south, with its own small door. Through the door there is the faint warm light of a fire. The fire is kept always burning in that cell, and it has been kept always burning for 4 years now. It is the cell built off the infirmary for an abbot who was too frail to keep the ordinary life, and in that cell a friend of Hild's, another old brother, is being softly sung through the last offices by the monks who love him. Hild looks down the passage a moment. He knows the cell. He has looked in on it many nights. He does not need to look in now. The men who are with him are the ones who love him best. That is where we go next. The small lamp on the ledge in Hugh's cell burns on quietly beside Hild, behind us as we go. So we go down the passage to the small cell where the fire is kept always burning. The cell we are going to belongs, in the imagination of this narration, to the abbey's own oldest and most beloved brother, a man who has been in this house 60 years, and who is now in the last weeks of his life, and through him, tonight, we are going to look at a real man in real history, a very great English monk of the 12th century, whose life was written by one of his own monks, and whose own small cell is very well remembered. His name is Aelred, of the great Cistercian house of Rivol in the North Riding of Yorkshire. Aelred of Rivol was abbot of the great Cistercian house of Rivol in the North Riding of Yorkshire at the height of that abbey's life. He died in 1166. In his own person he was warm, gentle, brilliant, physically frail, and beloved of his community in a way that has left more traces in the record than almost any other English abbot of the 12th century. His most famous book is called On Spiritual Friendship. It is written in the form of a dialogue between Aelred himself and a young novice called Evo, and it dates from about the year 1140. The two friends walk in the cloister and talk of what friendship is between men who live together under one rule. It is one of the warmest books to come out of the whole medieval church. It has one of the warmest opening lines. Aelred says to Evo, at the very beginning of the dialogue, "Here we are, you and I hope Christ makes a third among us. Here we are, you and I hope Christ makes a third among us." That is Aelred speaking. That is the voice of the man. By his last years, Aelred was worn down by illness and by the ascetic life. His voice, which had always been the warmest voice at Rivol, was thin, and so, in his last years, Aelred was given a small stone cell built off the infirmary at Rivol, and in that cell a fire was kept in it always, and the brethren of Rivol came to that cell to be with him. Walter Daniel wrote all this down. He says that the abbot lay in the cell in his last illness, and the brethren came to him and stood about his bed, and Aelred spoke to them, and Aelred said in the low voice he had, "Hasten, hasten, for love of Christ. Hasten, hasten, for love of Christ." Those are Aelred's last recorded words in Walter Daniel's Life of Aelred, written soon after Aelred's death in 1166. Not written down long after, written down by a man who had been in the room. The scene Walter Daniel gives is one of the tenderest of the whole English Middle Ages. The brethren of Rievaulx were with him. They were standing around his bed. They were singing him softly through the last offices. He was warm from the fire in his cell. He was surrounded by the men he loved and by the men who loved him. And that is the picture that this ordinary little cell of the ordinary little abbey we are visiting tonight can borrow from the great abbey of Rievaulx. Because in our house tonight, in the small cell off the infirmary in which the fire is always burning, an old brother is being softly sung through the last offices by the men who love him. He is not Aelred. He is a lesser man than Aelred, at a lesser abbey. But he has been in this house 60 years, and he is loved. And 4 of his oldest friends have come from the choir at the interval between nocturnes and lauds, and they are standing very quietly around his bed, in their long undyed woolen habits, in the warm light of the small fire, and they are singing him one of the ancient hymns of the last hours, in the plain chant, in one low warm voice, in unison. They are not doing it for spectacle. They are not doing it to be watched. They are doing it because it is what has always been done, and because it is one of the last things you can do for a friend. The old brother in the bed does not open his eyes, but he hears them. His hand on the blanket moves a little. It is not a large movement. It is the small movement of a very old hand hearing a very old song. Hill the infirmary lay brother is not in this cell. He has stayed in his own cell down the passage with Hugh. This cell has its own keeper, an older infirmarian named Brother Aidan, who is standing at the foot of the bed with his hands folded, watching the 4 brothers sing. The 4 brothers finish the hymn. They stand still for a breath. Then, one by one, without any small ceremony, each of them steps to the head of the bed, lays a hand for a moment on the old brother's shoulder, gives him a small silent word. Whatever small word he gives him is only his, and steps back. The last of them, an older man with a very kind face, stays a moment longer. His hand rests on the shoulder longer. Then he too steps back, and turns, and walks quietly out of the cell. Aidan, at the foot of the bed, gives a small nod to the 4 brothers as they leave. He stays. He will stay through the last hour of the night in the cell with the old brother in the warm light of the small fire. The small fire crackles softly to itself. 2 centuries after Aelred of Rievaulx died in his own small cell with his own brethren around him, a man in another English abbey, or perhaps in this very one, is being warmed in the same way. Both are true. The scene has repeated itself, in the same shape, with different men in it, in every generation of every English abbey since the 12th century, at a rough estimate several thousand times. The small lamp in this cell on its ledge burns on quietly beside the fire. The sanctuary lamp is burning in the church. The fire in the warming house is banked. Somewhere in the dark a hand is keeping a small light, and along the north walk of the cloister, on the other side of the precinct, a very different small warm light is burning, at a small writing carrel between the stone pillars of the arcade where a black monk is at work by night. That is where we go next. The small fire in the old brother's cell burns on quietly behind us as we go. So we cross the whole precinct. We come out of the infirmary court, back into the cloister, and turn along the east walk and then the north walk. The north walk is the walk that faces south, and so, in the day, it gets the sun. That is why every Western monastic cloister of the classic plan has the scriptorium, the writing house, in the north walk. The northern arcade catches the southern light. The writing brothers, working by day in the small carrels built between the pillars of that arcade, had the best working light of any room in the abbey. By night the scriptorium is not usually a working room, but in some houses, in some seasons, a lamp is set in one carrel and a brother is at work. Tonight in our abbey, one lamp is burning in one carrel of the north walk. The lamp is a small oil lamp set on the small writing shelf. The carrel has a low wooden partition on each side so that the working brother sits in his own small room of stone and wood, with just his shelf and his book and his pens in front of him, and the cloister beyond his own small circle of light. The brother tonight is not a real brother of this house. He is not a real brother of any house. But if we are to speak of a black monk of a great Benedictine cathedral priory, who worked by night in a scriptorium in the middle of the 13th century, there is only one man to speak of, and his name was Matthew Paris of St. Albans. Matthew Paris was a black monk of the great Benedictine Abbey of St. Albans in Hertfordshire. He worked in the scriptorium there for the whole of his adult life. He lived from about the year 1200 until his death in 1259. He is one of the great pens of medieval England. His most famous book is called the Chronica Majora, the Great Chronicle. It is the fullest history we have of 13th century England. It gives us the news of the country as Matthew heard it, at St. Albans, in his own hand. He did the writing himself, on parchment prepared in the St. Albans scriptorium, in inks made in the abbey. He drew his own margin illustrations in delicate coloured washes. Some of them are among the loveliest in the whole medieval English record. He is present in his own book as an artist and as a man. He worked in the scriptorium at St. Albans in the North Walk. He worked in a small carrel between two pillars. He had a shelf, he had a lamp, he had an inkhorn, he had a pen. In the coldest weeks of the year, by the practice of the Cistercian and Benedictine writing brothers of his age, the horn would be greased with a smear of animal fat so that the ink did not freeze on the nib, and grease was rubbed on the tonsure against the cold. All of these small tricks of the winter scriptorium are in the customaries. Matthew, one of the greatest chroniclers of medieval England, kept working at his shelf by these means. His own carrel at St. Albans is long gone. The scriptorium at St. Albans stood in the cloister of the great abbey, which was dissolved in the 1530s, and the cloister was pulled down not many years after. But the great abbey church of St. Albans still stands, still in use, now the Cathedral of St. Albans. And the north walk of the cloister where Matthew wrote can still be traced in the stones of the south wall of that great church. And Matthew is not the only St. Albans man of the medieval scriptorium worth naming. Generations after Matthew died, a later abbot of St. Albans named Richard of Wallingford built in the tower of St. Albans the great astronomical clock of the medieval world. Richard of Wallingford was a mathematician. He wrote a whole book on how to build his clock. The clock stood in the abbey tower from the 1330s. Its original was lost. But Richard's own book of instructions survived, and in the 20th century a modern craftsman rebuilt the clock from Richard's own drawings, and the reconstruction now stands in the south transept of St. Albans Cathedral, and can be seen there today by anyone who visits. Two St. Albans men, Matthew Paris and Richard of Wallingford, at the same abbey, in the same walk of the same cloister, a century apart. One of them holding the whole history of the 13th century England in his ink, the other of them keeping the whole time of the 14th century abbey by his gears, and both of them, in the middle of the night in their turn, sitting in a small carrel in the north walk with a small oil lamp on the shelf and working. Tonight in our abbey the brother in the carrel is not Matthew. He is another man at another house, working on a fair copy of a book of hours for a benefactor. His head is bent over his page, his right hand holds a quill, his left hand steadies a small ivory ruler on the page. His eyes are close to the page, his breath is slow. Behind him, on his own small ledge, sits a small warm brick brought from the calefactory hearth after the collation. The brick is still warm, his feet tucked under the carrel bench rest on it. He works. The sanctuary lamp is burning. The fire in the warming house is banked. Somewhere in the dark a hand is keeping a small light. Beside him, on his own shelf, sits his small inkhorn. He has greased it earlier this evening. The ink is not freezing tonight, because tonight is not that cold, but the greasing is habit. He turns the ruler a small distance down the page. He dips the quill in the horn. He draws one very fine straight line. He waits for it to dry. He draws another. He is ruling the lines for the next page. On the next page he will letter, tomorrow by day when the light is up, a fair copy of one of the Psalms of Matins. In another 2 years the book will be finished, and it will be bound in blue calf skin, and it will be given to the benefactor whose name is written on the flyleaf. It will still exist 500 years later. Long after this abbey is dissolved, long after the walls are pulled down, the book will sit in a library somewhere, and a stranger will lift it out of a case and open it, and see the very lines this brother is ruling tonight and never know his name. He works on quietly. And further along the cloister, past the freighter, past the parlour, past the door of the warming house, the great kitchen's own night-keeper is up and moving at the ovens. That is where we go next. The small oil lamp in the scriptorium carrel burns on quietly behind us as we go. So we come along the south walk of the cloister and turn out through the west door and into the great kitchen. The great kitchen of a Benedictine or Cistercian house of this period was a great vaulted room built out from the west end of the Frata. Its plan varied a little from house to house, but the shape was much the same everywhere. A high stone floor, a great central fireplace, sometimes with 2 hearths back to back, sometimes with 4, so that 4 cooks could work at once at their own spits and pots. Along the walls, side ovens for bread and pastry, built into the thickness of the stone. In the corners, small stone sinks with lead pipes bringing water from the abbey's own leat. And in the roof, 1 or more great stone chimneys or louvres, so the smoke could rise up out of the kitchen and not choke the cooks. At Glastonbury Abbey, in the west of the country, the abbot's kitchen was a separate building of its own, and it still stands today, empty and beautiful, in the field where the abbey ruins are. The kitchen at the abbey we are in tonight is not as great as Glastonbury's, but it is not far off. It is a fine vaulted room. The kitchen tonight is being kept by 2 people. The first is the kitchener, whose office is to be responsible for the whole feeding of the abbey. His name we may call Brother Godric of the kitchen, to distinguish him from Godric of the choir whom we met at the second lesson tonight. Brother Godric of the kitchen is 55. He was made kitchener 8 years ago after 20 years in the abbey's cellarage. He knows every barrel and every sack. He knows the weight of every loaf. He knows the yield of every sack of grain. He knows how many gallons of pottage feed the whole community, and how many extra portions are asked for by the guest hall in a week, and how many bushels of oats a year the horses in the stable eat. He is very good at his office. The second person keeping the kitchen tonight is a small kitchen boy. His name we may call young Wulfric. He is a boy of about 11. He is not a monk, not a novice, not vowed to anything. He is one of the many oblate and lay children who were placed by their families with the abbey in this period as a way of giving them a life and a trade. He is being trained toward the kitchen. He sleeps on a small straw pallet in the corner of the kitchen closest to the ovens, where it is warmest. He does that because it is the warmest place in the whole abbey precinct at night. He is very happy about it. Wulfric is asleep now. He is curled on his side on his pallet in the corner. His face is turned toward the ovens. The blanket is up under his chin. His breath is slow. He's not going to be awake for another hour. Godric of the kitchen is not asleep. Godric is at the great central fireplace, and he is banking the fires up carefully for the morning. He is not lighting them big. He is keeping them small and steady, so that the low heat will hold through the last 3 hours of the night and be alive at first grey, to be brought up quickly to a full working heat for the morning's bread and the morning's pottage and the morning's fish stew. He has swept the hearthstone. He has laid a small pile of split kindling ready. He has stacked, at the edge of the hearth, 3 good split logs, seasoned oak for the morning fire. Beside him, on the great kitchen table, are the 2 bread trays for tomorrow's morning bread. The bread sponge for the morning was set at dusk yesterday by the day baker, and it has been slowly rising in the covered wooden trays under a linen cloth in the warm corner near the ovens. It has doubled in size. Godric lifts the cloth. He looks at the sponge. He nods. He puts the cloth back down. The sponge will hold for another 2 hours. Then Godric or one of the bakers will begin to shape it into loaves for the ovens. The bread of the abbey in this age is a coarse maslin bread, made from a mixture of rye and wheat and sometimes barley, ground at the abbey's own mill from the abbey's own grain. The dough is worked by hand on the great table. The loaves are round, about £1 each, and there are a great many of them, because a great house feeds 50 choir monks, another 20 or 30 lay brothers, 20 servants, and a rotating population of guests, and each of those men eats about ½ pound of bread at the morning meal, and a whole pound at the evening one. That is between 80 and 100 loaves a day out of this one kitchen. Godric has kept those numbers in his head, the way an accountant keeps a ledger. He walks now to the small side sink and washes his hands. He dries them on a linen cloth hanging on a hook. He goes back to the fire and sets one small log gently onto it. The log catches. A small warm flare. The fire brightens. The kitchen becomes, for a moment, quite bright. Godric looks at the fire. He looks at the sleeping boy in the corner. He looks at the 2 bread trays with the risen sponge. He nods to himself. He walks quietly to a small stool at the corner of the great table and sits down. He rests his hands on his knees. He watches the fire. The kitchen becomes still. The sanctuary lamp is burning. The fire in the warming house is banked. Somewhere in the dark a hand is keeping a small light. Godric does not doze. He does not sleep. He keeps the fire. The abbot's kitchen at Glastonbury Abbey in the west of the country is one of the finest surviving buildings of the medieval English abbey. It is a fine stone building still standing in its field today. If you walk into it, empty as it is, the shape of it tells you what an abbey kitchen felt like. Warm, vaulted, alive with the sound of a small fire in the corner. Godric would recognise it in a moment. Wulfric the boy would recognise it in a moment. Every kitchen boy of every English abbey of the last 500 years of the Middle Ages would recognise it. And every one of those kitchens in the middle of the night had a Godric sitting on a stool at a table keeping a small fire. The fire in this kitchen tonight is glowing steady. The sponge on the table is rising. The boy in the corner is asleep. Godric on his stool watches the fire. Along the cloister, and out past the kitchen passage and across the outer court, the west range of the lay brothers is quiet, and the lay brothers' own night keepers are moving in their own small way. That is where we go next. The small clean light of Godric's fire burns on quietly behind us as we go. So we cross the outer court and come to the low door in the west range of the cloister. The west range, in a Cistercian house of this period, was the long 2-storey building that ran the whole length of the west side of the cloister. Its lower floor held the lay brothers' frater, a long parlour, the lay brothers' small cellar, and the passage under the day stair up to their own dorter above. Its upper floor was the lay brothers' dorter itself, a long low room with a line of straw pallets down each side and a small stair at the far end that led down to their own night door out into the outer court. By the year we stand in tonight, the west range at most Cistercian houses was as long and as important as the east range where the choir monks slept. At Fountains it was 300 feet long, and the ground floor of it was that great vaulted solarium which still stands today, and the upper floor of it was the great daughter of the Lay brothers. It was in this range that a whole class of vowed men lived their whole night lives, entirely apart from the choir. The Lay brothers were the Cistercian invention. We spoke of it earlier, in the outer court, when we watched Wulfric of the North Grange come in from the byres. What sits here quietly at the back of the whole night is the fact that a whole second monastic life was built inside the abbey, running parallel to the choir monks, at the hands of ordinary farming men who never learnt Latin and never sang the office, and yet were vowed as fully as any choir monk in the house. They rose earlier than the choir monks. In most Cistercian houses of this period, the Lay brothers' bell went well before the choir bell went for the community. They came into their own small oratory at the end of their daughter. They said their own brief round of paters and aves. In place of the psalter they could not read. They ate a small dry meal in their freighter, and they were out at the byres and the mills and the woodyards by first grey. That is the working shape of their day. But the night, and the deep of the night, in the West Range daughter tonight, is quiet. The Lay brothers went to bed at 7:30 yesterday evening, well before Compline, because they will rise at 3:30 today. 12 of them are asleep on their straw pallets in one long low room. Their breathing is even and warm. There is one small oil lamp trimmed low near the door of the daughter, in case anyone has to move in the night. At the far end of the daughter, on his own pallet, is brother Wulfric of the North Grange, the same young man we watched come in from the byres in chapter 3, the same young man we saw eat his evening meal in the West Range Frater, quiet, listening to the community's chant of vespers coming down through the wall. He is not asleep any more. He woke a few minutes ago in the dark at the pull of long habit. Even without a bell, his body has learnt when to rise. He lies for a moment on his side. He listens. He hears the 11 other men breathing. He does not want to disturb them. He sits up gently. He puts his sandals on. He stands. He wraps his cloak around his shoulders because the West Range is cold at this hour. He crosses the daughter softly past the small oil lamp near the door and down the small stair at the end of the room to the ground floor. He does not need the lamp. He knows the stair by long practice. At the ground floor he steps out through the small night door of the West Range into the outer court. The night air is very cold. His breath goes up in a small white cloud. He pulls his cloak more closely around his shoulders and walks quietly across the outer court to the stables. He is not going out to work yet. His day does not begin for another half an hour. He is going out to check on the pony. The pony from the North Grange that he rubbed down last evening has been a little tired for 2 days now, and Wulfric has been keeping an eye on her. He worries about her the way a young man worries about an old good horse. He opens the stable door a hand's width and looks in. The pony is standing up. She's standing very quietly at her stall, her head lowered, her weight even on all 4 legs. She sees him. She flicks one ear at him. He's very glad. A pony that lay all night and could not get up would be a much worse pony in the morning. He goes into the stall and puts his hand on her neck. Her coat is warm. He rests his hand a moment. She lets him rest it. He runs his hand down her neck to her shoulder, and down her shoulder to her leg, and along her back. He's checking, in the way of a man who has been around horses his whole young life, whether her body feels tight or easy. She feels easy. He is very glad. She will be fine for the barley today. He gives her a small piece of dried apple from a pocket inside his cloak. She takes it very gently from his palm. He leaves the stall and closes the stable door softly. He stands for a moment in the outer court. Above him the sky is now beginning to show a very faint change at the eastern edge. Not colour yet, not light yet, just the very first suggestion that the whole night is turning a corner. In another hour the first grey will be in the east. In another hour and a half the first birds will begin. He crosses the outer court back to the West Range. He goes back inside quietly. He goes up the small stair. He goes down the daughter to his own pallet. He takes off his sandals. He sits down on his pallet. He does not lie down. He has half an hour of quiet before the lay brother's bell goes, and he will spend it sitting on his pallet in the dark, saying his own quiet paters under his breath, thinking about the pony and about the barley and about the weather over the North Ridge. It is his own quiet office of the last watch of the night. The lay brother's small oil lamp near the door burns on quietly. Along the cloister a small lamp is moving quietly from door to door. That is the roundsman on his second silent watch, and that is where we go next. The small lamp of the West Range daughter burns on quietly behind us as we go. So we come back into the cloister to walk with Osbert the circuitor on his second round of the night. Osbert has been in the parlour for the whole of the night office and Lauds. He has said his own quiet prayers there. He has done his first round of the cloister and the daughter about half an hour after Compline, walking softly with his small lantern in his hand, opening no doors that did not need opening, closing no doors that were open. He has checked that the candles in the cells were all snuffed, that the rearer daughter was quiet, that no small fire had crept anywhere it should not, and that no brother was sitting up in the dark for a reason other than a small necessary one. The house was in order. Now, 3 hours later, at the transition between the community's second sleep and the first grey, he is doing his second round. He is standing at the corner of the parlour and the cloister. He has taken up his small lantern from its bracket beside him. He has lit its wick fresh from his own small candle. He steps out into the cloister. The cloister at this hour is at its deepest cold. The stone under his sandals is like ice. The arcades above his head are open to a sky that is now perhaps very faintly greying at the east, and still deeply dark to the west. His breath makes a small white cloud in the air of the cloister. He walks slowly along the east walk toward the north transept door. He is not going into the church tonight. The church has its own night keeper in the sacrist. The circuitor's round is the cloister and the daughter, and the rearer daughter, and the freighter and the calefactory. He walks the cloister. Along the east walk he passes the door of the chapter house. It is closed. He passes the door of the parlour, which he has just come out of. He passes the day stair. He does not go up. He turns at the corner into the north walk past the scriptorium carol, where the working brother we watched earlier is still bent over his ruled page, still working quietly by his small oil lamp. Osbert gives the working brother a small nod through the low partition. The working brother lifts his head a moment, gives Osbert a small nod back and returns to his page. Osbert walks on. Along the north walk he passes the empty carols. Each carol is a small dark shape between two pillars. He does not open any of them. He does not check them. The whole point of Osbert's round is that his presence, going quietly along the cloister with a small lantern, is itself the reassurance. At the far end of the north walk he turns into the west walk. He passes the lavatorium still dripping very slowly at one of its taps. He passes the door of the freighter. He turns at the corner and comes into the south walk. He passes the door of the warming house. The warming house door is closed. Inside it, we know, John le chauffeur is asleep on his straw pallet, and the fire is banked with a spadeful of ash and glowing quietly red. Osbert knows this too. He does not open the door. He walks on. He comes back to his own corner, at the parlour and the cloister. That is the whole first half of his round. Now he goes up the day stair. He climbs it quietly, one hand on the wall, the lantern in the other. At the top of the stair he steps out into the daughter aisle. He stands at the head of the aisle a moment and listens. The whole daughter is asleep. 50 men breathing quietly in their own cells behind their own low doors, in one long soft rhythm. Osbert listens for a full slow breath. He hears no coughs. He hears no groans. He hears no small sound of a brother sitting up in the dark. The daughter is well. He walks the aisle slowly. He does not open any cell door. He looks along the aisle from side to side as he walks. The soft warm light of his small lantern moves the shadows of the cell doors slightly as he passes, and then lets them settle back into the dark. Behind him, one by one, the doors of the aisle become dark again. Ahead of him, one by one, they come into a soft warm light and then fade, the small lamp going quietly from door to door. At the far end of the aisle, at the door to the night stair, he stops. The night stair is empty. Its worn stone hollows sit quietly in the dark. He listens for a moment down the well of the stair. He hears the very faint sound of the community's plain chant of Lauds still running in the choir below. The sound is faint. It is the sound of the last psalms of praise. Lauds is coming to its close. He turns. He walks back up the aisle to the head of the day stair. He goes down. He steps out into the cloister again. He crosses the east walk to the parlour door. He goes inside. The parlour is a small, square room. It has a low stone bench along one wall. It has a small unglazed slit window. It has a small oil lamp burning very low on a shelf. Osbert sets his lantern beside the small oil lamp. He sits down on the bench. He folds his hands in his lap. He waits. He will wait here until the first grey is properly in the eastern lancets of the church and Lauds has ended, and the community has come back up the day stair to the daughter for the second sleep, and the whole house is quiet again. Then he too will go back to his own cell for the last hour of sleep before prime. The sanctuary lamp is burning. The fire in the warming house is banked. Somewhere in the dark a hand is keeping a small light. 2 or 3 rounds a night in the Cistercian houses for the circuiter, sometimes only 2 in the softer discipline of the black monks. In this house tonight Osbert has done his 2 rounds, and both were good, and the house is well. Along the passage to the outer wall at the great gate a small lamp is still burning quietly above the wicket. That is Edmund's lamp, and Edmund is at the gate. That is where we go next. The small lamp of the parlour burns on quietly beside Osbert behind us as we go. So we come back out through the outer passage and along the wall to the great gate. Edmund has been at the gate all night. He did not really sleep after all. He lay down on his little cot in the lodge for about an hour, some time after the community had gone to bed, but he did not sleep deeply. He half slept. He came awake at every small sound. He is used to it. It is the porter's way. He is up now. He is sitting on his stool by the wicket. His prayer book is on his knees, open at the page of the night office. He has been saying his own quiet nocturnes and lauds to himself under his breath. In the same low, soft voice we heard him say vespers in earlier this evening. His lantern above the wicket is still burning. He has trimmed the wick once during the night, quietly. The small warm circle of light it throws on the paving of the gatehouse yard is the only warm point of light on the whole road outside the outer wall, and it can be seen from a long way off through the trees if there is anyone on the road looking for it. Edmund knows this, because in his 11 years at the gate he has been the man who opened the wicket to many travellers who saw his lamp from far off and made straight for it in the dark. Sometimes the traveller was a merchant belated on the road from the north. Sometimes a village priest riding to see a bishop. Sometimes a poor woman with a child whose horse had gone lame in the last mile. Sometimes a passing friar on foot, having missed his own house by a wrong turning at dusk. Sometimes a bishop's messenger in a great hurry. Sometimes only a farmhand from 3 villages away, who had drunk too much in his uncle's cottage and could not find his way home. All of them, when they came to Edmund's gate, were let in. There is a rule, and we heard it earlier at the guest hall. Let all guests who arrive be received as Christ, for he himself will say, I was a stranger, and you took me in. The 53rd chapter of the Rule of St. Benedict. Every one of the travellers who ever came to Edmund's gate over 11 years was, in the plain understanding of Edmund's rule, Christ. The old man who could not remember his own way home was Christ. The bishop's messenger in a hurry was Christ. The frightened poor woman with the child was Christ. Edmund does not think about this every time he opens the wicket. He does not have to. It is in his hands. It is in the way his hands go to the key and turn it in the wicket lock without any fuss. There is another rule, and we heard it earlier too. At the gate of the monastery let there be placed a wise old man, who knows how to receive an answer and to give one, and whose ripeness of years suffers him not to wander. The 66th chapter of the Rule of Saint Benedict, written in the middle of the 6th century, old when Edmund's grandfather was young, old when the abbey was built, old. Edmund is that man. He hears something. A small hollow sound out on the road beyond the wicket. Not a horse, not two horses. One horse at a slow, tired walk. It is coming closer. Edmund lays down his prayer book. He stands up. He picks up his key from its peg on the wall behind him. He takes his lantern down from its hook above the wicket and holds it up and steps to the wicket. The horse has come up outside the wicket. Its walk has slowed. It has stopped. There is a very small sound, a knock, not a great confident knock, a small tired knock, made by a hand that is not quite sure it has come to the right place. Edmund lifts the small window in the wicket that has the iron grill. He looks through. Outside, on the road, in the small warm circle of the lantern light, is a man on horseback, a middle-aged man in a plain travelling cloak on a tired horse. His face is thin and cold. He looks very glad to see the wicket open. His horse is looking very glad too. Edmund says the small quiet words that a porter says at his gate. "Peace be with you, brother. Who are you, and where are you bound?" The man says his name, which we will not give here, because tonight the point is not who he is. He says he is bound for the great abbey 4 days further north, that he was set on by a very bad road and by a lame horse, and by the loss of his way after dusk, and that he's been riding since sunset in the wrong direction, and has only now, half an hour ago, seen the lamp above the wicket in the dark. He says he's very sorry to trouble the house. He says he only needs a place to leave the horse and a piece of floor by a fire until the light. He says he can pay. He says all this quickly, tired. Edmund does not answer for a moment. He looks at the man in the light of the lantern. He looks at the horse. Then he says the small quiet words that a porter says. "Christ has brought you here tonight, brother. Wait a moment." He puts his key in the wicket lock and turns it. He pulls the wicket open. The man dismounts stiffly. He leads his horse in through the wicket. He's a head taller than Edmund. He looks a good man. His hands, in the lantern light, are the hands of a scribe or a small merchant, not a fighting man's hands. Edmund closes the wicket behind him and locks it. He takes the horse by the bridle quietly and walks it a few paces across the gatehouse yard toward the stable that is set into the wall for late travellers. He opens the stable door. He leads the horse in. He unbuckles the girth and takes off the saddle. He sets the saddle on the wall bracket. He gives the horse a wooden bucket of water and a small handful of oats. He rubs the horse's neck for a moment. Then he steps out and closes the stable door. He turns to the man. He gives him a small nod. "Come with me, brother," he says. He walks him up the short slope from the gate. At the door of the guest hall, the small lantern above the door is still burning. Edmund knocks softly on the door with the flat of his hand. A moment later, Adam the guest master opens the door, blinking a little from the small oil lamp on the mat where he was asleep. Adam sees the traveller. Adam takes him in. Everything about Adam's face and his hand on the door tells us what we saw hours ago in his hospitable evening. The traveller is welcomed in. Adam gives Edmund a small nod over the man's shoulder. Edmund gives Adam a small nod back. Edmund turns and walks quietly back down the slope to his gatehouse. At the wicket he sets his lantern back on its hook. He picks up his prayer book from the stool. He sits down. He closes his eyes for a moment. He thanks God in his own quiet way that the wicket has been opened to a man tonight and that the man was received as Christ. Then he opens his prayer book. He's at the end of Lauds. He begins the collect. His lips move softly. His voice is a soft, warm rustle in the small stone lodge. Above him, in the church, Lauds is ending in the choir. Along the passage from the outer wall, the birds outside the wall have begun to answer the first grey in the east, which means the whole community is now going to turn from the choir up the day stair back to the daughter for a further hour of sleep. That is where we go next. The small lamp of Edmund's wicket burns on quietly behind us as we go. So the community is still in the choir. The lamps on the choir stalls have burned low again. The great candle on the altar is a little smaller than it was. Above the pyx, the sanctuary lamp burns on. The eastern lancets over the high altar are showing a very pale grey now, with the first faint suggestion of colour coming into their lowest edge. The community is singing on. Lauds is almost over. The 3 great psalms of praise have been sung, one after the other in the plain chant, at the same slow pace as everything else in the office. The community's voices are very quiet now. They are quiet not from fatigue, but from long practice. At this hour of the night the voice settles into its lowest, warmest register, and the whole choir sounds like one man speaking gently to a friend. Aldhelm the precentor gives the note for the Benedictus. The Benedictus rises. The community sings it standing, in the plain chant, in one long, low, warm voice. It is one of the warmest sounds this church makes in the year. The words in Latin flow slowly, one syllable at a time. The whole church, which was so cold at the beginning of nocturnes, now has a small kind of warmth in it, made by the voices themselves. The Benedictus ends, the collect follows. The abbot gives it from his second stall on the north. It is short. It gathers up the whole of Lauds and offers it in one warm sentence to God. The community answers Amen in one voice. Aldhelm gives no more notes. The community bows to the altar. One by one, the small tallow candles along the choir stalls are pinched out by their singers. The great candle on the altar is left burning. The sanctuary lamp burns on above the pyx. The eastern lancets are pale. The community turns. They walk out of the choir the way they came in, along the south side of the presbytery, past the small door at the foot of the night stair and out and up. They do not go back down the north transept and into the cloister. They go up the night stair the way they came down, because the day stair belongs to the day, and the night stair belongs to the night, and the community has not yet come to the day. They go up the worn stone hollows one by one. Each brother's foot finds the same hollow that his foot found 4 hours ago in the coming down. The stone is very warm now, from the feet of the coming down, and even a little warm from the community's own feet coming up again. The night stair is one of the small tender warmths of the morning. The community comes up through the small door in the east wall of the daughter and out into the aisle. Anselm the sacrist comes up last after he has snuffed his own small lamp in the sacristy and made sure the great candle on the altar is safe. He has left the great candle burning. He has left the sanctuary lamp burning. He walks up the night stair behind the last novice. At the head of the stair he steps into the aisle. He turns quietly to close the small night stair door behind him. He turns back. He walks up the aisle toward his own cell at the north end. Each brother goes to his own cell. Each brother enters his own cell. Each brother takes off his sandals and sets them under the bed. Each brother lies down on his straw mattress, in his habit, and pulls his blanket up. Each brother closes his eyes. Eldred the novice master walks slowly up the aisle behind his 3 novices. He waits at the door of the cell of young Cuthbert, the new novice, until Cuthbert is inside, and then closes the door quietly for him. He walks on to his own cell. He goes inside. He closes the door. He lies down. He closes his eyes. The aisle is empty. The small lamp at the head of the daughter aisle, the one that has burned low all night, burns on very low. That is where we go next. Into the second sleep of the community, an hour of quiet before prime. The small lamp of the sacristy burns on quietly behind us in the church as we go. So the whole daughter has fallen quiet again. 50 men are lying in their cells in their habits under their wool blankets, and each one of them has closed his eyes. They are not exactly asleep yet. They are in that state of half-sleep that follows an hour of standing and singing at 3 in the morning. The body knows it is time to rest. The mind is a little slower to let go, because the plain chant of Lauds is still faintly running in it. That is one of the very old truths of the Western monastic day. A plain chant office does not stop when it stops. It runs on in the mind of the man who has just been singing it for another 20 minutes or so, and then it settles. The community's plain chant of Lauds is settling now in 50 minds at once, and the daughter is a room of 50 settlings. At the far end of the aisle, in one of the small cells, is our old brother Godric. Godric, 71, who read the second lesson at nocturnes tonight. Godric, who has sung the whole Psalter 3,000 times in his life. He is lying on his side, in his habit, with his hand under his cheek, in exactly the position a young man might lie in. His face, in the dark of his cell, has the very calm, quiet look of a man who has just finished singing in a warm choir with his brothers and has come up to bed. He is not going straight to sleep. He knows he has an hour before the bell for prime, and he knows his body will use every minute of it. But he lies for a small while in the half-sleep with the plain chant of Lauds still running quietly in the back of his mind, and does not push it away. It is a very old friend to him. It has been running in his mind at this hour of every morning for 54 years. He would miss it if it were not there. Slowly, over the space of the first 10 minutes, the chant in Godric's mind slows too, and softens and quiets, and eases into a still, warm, even breath. He is asleep. Along the aisle, one by one, in the same slow way, the other brothers slip into the second sleep. Cuthbert, the new novice, whose first ever night this was, is asleep first, because at 17 the body takes any sleep it can. The 2 older novices are asleep next. Eldred, the novice master, at the door of his own cell, lies quietly in the half-sleep for a little longer, listening to the 3 novices breathing at the far end of the aisle, and only when he is content that all 3 of them are settled does he let himself go. Anselm the sacrist, up in his own cell at the north end of the aisle, does not sleep tonight. Anselm has his own small work to do at the beginning of the second sleep. He has to trim the great candle on the altar again in about half an hour, and check the sanctuary lamp again, and make sure the church is ready for prime. So he lies on his cot in his habit and closes his eyes for a little rest, but he does not sleep. He half sleeps. He is used to it. The abbot in his own room at the south end of the East Range is asleep, quietly, with his hand on his own blanket. The whole community is very quiet. The second sleep of the monastic day is one of the small gentle mercies of the horarium. It was not written into the rule of St. Benedict as a specific rule. It grew up in the customaries. It was thought about by the men who ran the houses over the centuries. It was seen that a body that had been up at 2:30 in the morning could not always be expected to work at full strength through the whole of prime and terce and sexton, nun and vespers and compline of the next day, without another hour of rest at first light. So the second sleep was allowed. It was called in some houses only a settling. It was in effect an hour of very deep sleep after the strong work of the night office had been done. An hour of the second sleep in midwinter, when the community had been on its feet for nearly 2 hours in the choir, and the daughter was warm from earlier bodies, was one of the sweetest hours of the whole monastic week. Tonight, in our early autumn, the second sleep will be about an hour and a quarter. It is being taken now. 50 men are in it. The great candle on the altar burns on. The sanctuary lamp burns on above the pyx. The small lamp at the head of the daughter aisle burns on very low. The lamp at the calefactory door and the lamp above Edmund's wicket, and the small lamp on the ledge in Brother Hugh's cell, and the small oil lamp in the Abbey scriptorium carrel, where the working brother is still, quietly, ruling one more page, all of them burn on. The sanctuary lamp is burning. The fire in the warming house is banked. Somewhere in the dark a hand is keeping a small light. Along the cloister the calefactory fire is still glowing red under its ash, and one man is quietly awake in the room with it. That is where we go next. The small lamp of the daughter aisle burns on very low behind us as we go. So we come along the east range and turn into the warming house. The warming house at this hour is the very warmest room in the whole Abbey precinct. Its stone benches, worn smooth by the shoulders of the community and the small permitted stations of the winter year, have held warmth all through the night. The great fireplace in the east wall that had a small fire in it for the reading of the collation has been banked now with a small spadeful of ash, and the fire is glowing red and orange under it, quietly, in a low even heat that will hold till dawn. John le chauffeur is in the room. He came back to the warming house half an hour ago. He had slept for a few hours on his straw pallet in the small servants' quarter behind the solarium. He woke a little before the second sleep of the community began. He got up quietly, put on his dun jerkin, put on his little leather cap, and came softly along the outer passage to the calefactory. He is not doing much. He is sitting on the small three-legged stool he uses at the hearth. He is watching the fire. Every few minutes he pushes at the ash with his iron. A soft, small orange flare comes up from under the ash. The fire settles. He watches it. He does not add wood. There is no need to add wood. The fire has enough to hold to dawn. He is here because in the last hour before first light he likes to be at his fire. It is one of the small quiet habits of a man who keeps a fire for a living. In the deep hour before dawn, when the whole house is at its second sleep, and there is nothing more the fire needs, John still likes to be here beside it. He does not know exactly why. He has been thinking about this for years. He thinks it is because the fire has been his whole life for a long time now, and because at this hour it is at its most quiet and most complete, glowing red under the ash, holding its own heat through the last watch of the night, doing what a fire is supposed to do, which is to be a warm thing in a cold house. 3 shillings a year and 1 leather jerkin at Michaelmas. That is what John le chauffeur of Selby was paid in the year 1283 for keeping the calefactory fire. It is not a great wage, it is what he was paid. He was recorded at that wage in the Abbey rolls, and his name has survived in that record for over 700 years into ours. That is a very old kind of small permanence. The Abbot of Selby, in the year 1283, did not know that 700 years later, a small stranger sitting in her own room, or a small stranger driving a long dark road with the radio soft, would be told by another stranger the name of the man who kept his calefactory fire. But that is what has happened. John le chauffeur's name is with us. It is in the rolls. It was written down, it has come down, and it belongs now in the small warm circle of the fire he is watching. John pushes at the ash again with his iron. A small orange flare. The fire settles. The sanctuary lamp is burning. The fire in the warming house is banked. Somewhere in the dark a hand is keeping a small light. John rests his hands on his knees. His breath is slow. He's not doing anything. He's watching a fire. If you were here and you were very tired, and you wanted to lie down for a moment on one of the long warm stone benches of the warming house, John would look up and smile at you, and he would not say anything. He would let you lie down. He would go back to watching his fire. He would let you sleep. That is what a good firekeeper does in a monastery. That is why he was paid, in his small way, at 3 shillings a year and 1 leather jerkin at Michaelmas. The whole abbey outside this room is very quiet. The great tower is a darker shape against a sky that is now beginning, at the very lowest edge in the east, to show the very first faint tint of gold. In another 20 minutes there will be more gold. In another 40 there will be enough light to walk the road without a lantern. In another hour the birds will be up. Inside the warming house, the fire glows quietly red under its ash. It is worth pausing here for a moment on the fact that a great many of these stones are still standing. That is where we go next. The small warm glow of John's fire burns on quietly behind us as we go. So we step out of the warming house and into the cloister, and we look around. You would notice at this hour that the whole abbey precinct is still deeply dark, but that the eastern sky above the tower has now a definite faint gold at its lowest edge. The night is going, the morning is coming. There is not enough light yet to walk without a lantern, but the birds beyond the outer wall have started. First one small bird, then another, then a small quiet chorus, and this whole abbey that we have been walking in the dark of for many quiet hours now will still be there in the morning, and, in a real and moving sense, it will still be there 700 years from now, because a great many of these walls are still standing. If you go north today into Yorkshire and take the small road that runs up the valley of the River Skell, you will come, after about 3 miles, to the whole standing complex of Fountains Abbey. Fountains was one of the greatest Cistercian houses in England. Its cellarium, the long vaulted storeroom of its lay brothers, 300 feet long, is still roofed and still whole, and you can walk the whole length of it. Its church nave is standing to its full height. Its cloister walls are traceable. Its warming house is walkable. Its infirmary court is a low garden of walls. You can stand in it in a summer afternoon and hear only the small sound of the river beyond the cloister, and the small warm sound of children calling to each other in the meadow, and know that the whole shape of a great medieval abbey is still there in the grass. If you go a little further up the North Riding to the small village of Rivaux in Rydale, you will find the standing walls of Rivaux Abbey. The presbytery of the church rises still, in tall pointed arches, against the wooded slope of the valley. The chapter house is a small quiet room in the grass. The south transept, at the door of which we have imagined the night stair coming down in this very narration, is standing. The whole valley of Rivaux is still one of the quietest and warmest places in the north. Byland Abbey at the foot of the Hambleton Hill stands too, its great walls still rising in the field. Kirkstall Abbey, just outside Leeds, stands. Furness Abbey, on the peninsula of Cumbria, stands. Tintern Abbey, above the Wye in Monmouthshire, stands. All of them are Cistercian, and all of them are open to any traveller who wants to walk in them in an afternoon and feel the shape of the world we've been in tonight. The Benedictine houses have survived too, but in a different way. Nearly every great English Benedictine cathedral priory of the medieval church has survived as its own cathedral. The vast Norman nave of Durham is the choir of the Black Monks. The soaring nave of Ely is the choir of the Black Monks. Peterborough, Gloucester, Winchester, Norwich, Canterbury, Chester, Worcester, Rochester. Each of these vast churches, still in use today in daily services, was until the 1530s the choir of a Benedictine community. The parishes and the chapters, at the dissolution, took the churches, and the churches survived. They are the fullest and most beautiful surviving trace of the medieval Black Monks in England, and in some of these places the actual small physical structures the community used at night are still there. The night stair at Hexham Priory in Northumberland, an Augustinian house, is still standing and can still be walked. The night stair, worn glassy smooth by the feet of Bristol's Augustinian community, is still in the stones of Bristol Cathedral. The great flight of steps that came down from the daughter's east wall into the south transept at Fountain still stands. The Frater pulpit at Beaulieu, the small spiral stair up the wall from which a young brother Wilfrid read Cassian at supper, still stands. The Frater pulpits at Chester and Shrewsbury still stand. The Great Abbot's kitchen at Glastonbury still stands. The Great Abbey barn at Great Coxwell, that belonged to Beaulieu, still stands. The astronomical clock of Richard of Wallingford, rebuilt in the 20th century from his own written instructions, stands now in the south transept of St Albans Cathedral, quietly telling the time in the way it was told at St Albans in the 1330s. The objects of the abbey survive too. The great illuminated psalters and antiphonary of these houses, in which every one of the 150 psalms was written out for the choir to sing from, are in the British Library and in the college libraries of Oxford and Cambridge. The Winchester Bible sits in Winchester Cathedral Library today. Matthew Paris of St Albans' own coloured drawings, his own hand, his own life on the parchment, sit in Cambridge and in London. Anyone who wants to see them can go and see them, and the words of the abbeys survive in your mouth. Curfew, vespers, compline, matins, vigil, cloister, chapel, sanctuary, novice, abbey, abbot, prior, dormitory, refectory, cellar, infirmary, sacristy. Every one of these words is a medieval English word given to your language by the walls we have been walking tonight. When you use the word curfew, you're saying couvre-feu, the fire cover, the small bell rung at 8 in the evening to require a town to cover its fires and go to bed, a bell first rung in English towns by a Norman abbot at Winchester in the 11th century. When you say vespers, you're saying vesper, the evening star, the ancient name for the last office of the day. Every night when you say good night to your family and go up to bed, you are using words that were made in the buildings of the very medieval abbeys we have been walking tonight, and the bells. In many English cathedral cities, in the very towers of these old Benedictine houses, the bells still hang and still ring. At Durham, at Canterbury, at Ely, at Norwich, at Peterborough, the medieval bells are still rung. The great bell of Durham, Great Peter, hangs where the medieval great bell hung. In the still air of a Durham evening, if you stand on the green below the cathedral, you can hear that bell roll the same rolls across the same roofs it has been rolling for a very great many 100 years. There were, in the period we stand in tonight, about 900 religious houses in England and Wales, holding perhaps 17 or 18,000 vowed inhabitants. It was the country's largest single institution. Most of it was pulled down in the 1530s, but the walls we have been walking tonight, and the words in your mouth tonight, and the bells above the towers of Durham and Canterbury and Ely tonight are still with you. And in a handful of English abbeys the whole way of life is still being kept, at Downside, at Ampleforth, at Prinknash, and for the Cistercians, at Mount St. Bernard in Leicestershire. The night stair is still walked, the plain chant is still sung. Somewhere in England at 3 in the morning tonight, a small bell is going and a community is coming down a small stone stair in the dark to sing. The sanctuary lamp is burning. The fire in the warming house is banked. Somewhere in the dark a hand is keeping a small light. And now, at last, we go to the very warmest room of the whole night. That is where we go next. The small warm gold at the eastern edge of the sky burns on quietly behind us as we go. So we come back through the cloister to the warming house. The whole abbey is very quiet. The sanctuary lamp above the pyx in the church is burning on. The great candle on the altar is burned low, and Anselm has just come down the day stair in the last of the second sleep and quietly gone into the church to trim it once more and check that all is ready for prime, and has now come back into the cloister and gone up again to his own cell for the last 10 minutes of his own rest. The daughter is very quiet. 50 men are in the last minutes of the second sleep. Godric is asleep with his hand under his cheek. Cuthbert the novice is asleep with the blanket up under his chin, and he has slept through his first ever night as a monk without waking once. Eldred the novice master is asleep at the far end of the aisle, near his novices, one hand on the blanket. The abbot in his own small room is asleep quietly. The small lamp at the head of the daughter aisle burns on very low. The infirmary is quiet. Hild the lay brother is sitting on his stool by brother Hugh's bed, and Hugh is asleep with the warmed stone at his feet under the blanket, and the small oil lamp on the ledge burns quietly beside them. Down the passage, Aidan the older infirmarian is sitting at the foot of the small fire in the cell of the old brother we love, and the small fire is glowing, and the old brother is asleep, and the friends who sang him through the last offices have long since gone back to their own cells. At the great gate, Edmund the porter is at his stool by the wicket. He has said his own quiet Lauds. He has said his own quiet Benedictus. He has said his own quiet Collect. He has closed his prayer book. He is watching the paving of his gatehouse yard slowly come out of the dark, one small stone at a time, as the first faint gold begins to grow at the east. At the guest hall, Adam the guest master is asleep on his mat in the corner. The traveller Edmund brought to him has been warmed and fed, and put to bed in one of the small cubicles behind the curtain, and is asleep, and does not know that his was one of the small great acts of the whole night. Because Christ arrived at Edmund's gate, and was received, and was warmed. That is the rule of the 53rd chapter of the Rule of St. Benedict, and tonight it was kept. At the outer court, Wulfric of the North Grange is sitting on his pallet in the West Range Daughter, saying his own quiet paters under his breath, waiting for the lay brother's bell to go. In another 5 minutes the bell will go, and he will be up on his feet and out to the byres. At the scriptorium carol the working brother has ruled his page. He has capped his inkhorn. He has snuffed his own small lamp. He has gone quietly to his cell. At the great kitchen, Godric of the kitchen is at his stool at the corner of the great table. The fires are glowing steady. Young Wulfric the boy is asleep in the warm corner near the ovens, his blanket up under his chin, his breath slow. In the parlour, Osbert the circuitor is asleep on the low stone bench with his cloak wrapped around him. He will rise for prime, and in the warming house John le Chauffeur is on his stool at the hearth, watching the fire. You are placed here, tonight, with him. The bench beside him is warm, the stone floor is warm, the fire is glowing quietly red under its ash. The small warm circle of the fire's light rests on his hands, on his knees, on your knees, on his old dun jerkin, on the stones of the wall behind him. Above the whole warming house, and above the whole abbey, the sky is now showing a definite gold at the east, but it is a soft gold, and it is a long way off, and it does not touch this warm little room. The question at the top of the night was, who is awake, and why, while the whole valley sleeps? Here, at the very end of it, is the answer. The house that keeps the night for the sake of the ones asleep in it, and the ones asleep in the villages, and the ones asleep in the guest hall, and the very old one asleep in the infirmary, and the traveller now asleep at the gate, and the listener now asleep wherever the listener is. That is who has been awake tonight. That is why. That is the whole answer. A great medieval English abbey is a house of about 50 vowed men, kept by another 100 servants and lay brothers, whose whole calendar and whole architecture and whose whole vocation was to keep the night for everyone else. It has always been kept. It is being kept tonight. It will be kept tomorrow. The fire in the warming house glows quietly red under its ash. John le Chauffeur, in his dun jerkin on his stool, watches it with you. The fire is banked, the abbey is kept in its own quiet dark, and the night will keep till morning. Sleep well, friend. If any part of tonight stayed with you, leave it in a line below and I will read it. A soft like and a subscribe if you like the channel. Help these long histories find the people who want them. And next time, we go somewhere warm and low and small, with a very different quiet in it. Good night, from the warming house of a medieval English abbey, at the very first grey of a morning, in the small warm circle of an old man's small fire,